Chapter 740. Multitasking was not a difficult task for a cultivator, but it was difficult to execute two high-level secret techniques to the extreme. Ling Han first began to deduce the earth-overturning seal, making it able to be unleashed with one hand. The difficulty did not lie in the technique. In truth, mystical powers did not have any techniques. At least, that was the case for the four mystical powers that Ling Han had learned. Mystical powers mostly taught you how to circulate your origin power and conform to a certain set of rules, but as for how to use it, it was completely up to you. For example, if the earth-overturning seal was unleashed, then both hands would be covered with special vein-like patterns, and its power would come from these vein-like patterns, possessing extremely terrifying destructive power. The annihilating dragon star arrow was the same, concentrating the vein-like patterns on the arrow and shooting out a destructive arrow. Thus, this archery technique didn't even need a real bow and arrow. With the body as the bow and origin power as the arrow, it could unleash extremely powerful destructive power. What Ling Han had to do was to combine the vein-like patterns that were originally distributed on both hands onto one hand. He painstakingly deduced, and time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, another month passed, and he finally revealed a smile. His left hand opened, and the vein-like patterns weaved densely. Strangely, the demonic patterns actually resonated and combined with the earth-overturning seal. Although the two are completely different, why do I find similarities? Ling Han found it strange. This is the power of regulation. Small tower appeared. Regulation. Ling Han murmured. Small Tower had said long ago that the demonic patterns were formed from the regulation of a realm. He only knew that they were very powerful, but didn't know why. He said, "Come, explain in detail." "I have no obligation." Small Tower was very proud. However, the so-called mystical powers can all touch the edge of the power of regulation, so you should properly cultivate these mystical powers. It will be very beneficial to you. Even if you don't say it, we know. Ling Han was very depressed. This damn proud tower didn't treat him as its master at all. One day, he would stuff it into the latrine and make it reflect on itself. He exited the Black Tower, only to see that the great army that the Flame King had originally stationed had already disappeared, and not far away, a flag representing the Purple Moon Empire was planted on top of the city walls. Obviously, the Flame King had already taken down this city, and continued his pace of expansion. Ling Han released everyone from the Black Tower, and headed towards the city. He wanted to scout out the situation. As it turned out, the Lunar King had once again brought a large army over half a month ago, and joined forces with the Flame King. The two great elites launched a fierce attack, completely defeating the forces defending the city, and forcing the allied forces of the five great sects to retreat once again. They're recruiting. They're recruiting. A soldier on the street was shouting loudly. Join the Purple Moon Army and you'll have the chance to learn high-grade martial arts and cultivation methods. Don't miss this chance if you want to be friends with a powerhouse. Ling Han couldn't help but want to laugh. Ma Duo Bao wasn't reliable, and the soldiers under him weren't reliable either. This recruitment slogan really made people want to laugh. However, the temptation of cultivation techniques and martial skills was really attractive. Many people were stuck in a certain tier, not because they didn't have enough talent or resources, but because they lacked higher-level cultivation techniques. This cultivation technique of mine can only be cultivated to the deity transformation tier, so how can I cross into the heaven tier? Although there were indeed spirit medicines in this world that could allow martial artists to reach the heavens in a single step, the amount was really pitifully small, and one had to have nature-defying luck to obtain them. However, most people's luck was very ordinary, and high-grade cultivation techniques were viewed as treasures by various great forces. Those who weren't true disciples or core clansmen couldn't cultivate them at all, and it was difficult to obtain high-grade cultivation techniques. That was why so many people went to ancient sites to explore, wasn't it for the sake of breaking through shackles in the future? Now, the Purple Moon Empire used cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques to recruit soldiers, which naturally attracted people. Ling Han also wanted to know the true situation of the Purple Moon Empire, so he said, "Let's go and enlist in the army." They walked over, and Ling Han said, "Little brother, if we enlist, we can learn high-grade cultivation techniques." "Of course, as long as you can establish military merit," the soldier said. "Oh, how so?" There were quite a few people gathered around. The soldier cleared his throat, and said loudly, "I've already explained how to obtain cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques many times, but every time, new friends come over, so I'll still continue to explain. Those who haven't heard of it, please listen carefully. In our Purple Moon Army, there are a total of 5 levels of official titles: King, General, Colonel, Captain, and Soldier. As long as you can enlist, you'll be the lowest rank, Soldier. Soldiers can learn any level 6 cultivation technique, allowing you to steadily advance into the flower blossom tier." "Hiss!" everyone cried out in surprise. It was the first time most people here had heard of this, so they naturally couldn't help being shocked. Although this was the middle state, where martial art was the most prosperous, flower blossom tier cultivators broke away from the mortal world and had an extra 200 years of lifespan. Placed anywhere, they could be called an elite, and would be put in an important position in any force. But precisely because of this, level 6 cultivation techniques were not easy to obtain. Who knew how many people were stuck in the spiritual pedestal tier? Firstly, they didn't have enough talent, resources, and secondly, they didn't have a cultivation technique, so how could they break away from the mortal world? Most importantly, advancing into the flower blossom tier would give them an extra 200 years of lifespan. This surpassed any kind of longevity spirit medicine, so who wouldn't want it? The soldier laughed, and said, "However, it's not that easy to become a soldier. At least, you need to be in the spiritual ocean tier, and after becoming a soldier, after every battle or completing a mission, military merit will be calculated. Once your military merit has reached a certain level, you can be promoted from soldier to captain. If you're a captain, you can obtain a complete level 7 cultivation technique and an earth-grade martial arts technique. Similarly, accumulating military merit can continue to be promoted to colonel, general, king, and if you become a king, you can choose any secret technique, and even learn mystical powers. Mystical powers. Everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. Although most people didn't know what a mystical power was, it had the word divine in it, so how could it not be awesome? I'll sign up, I'll sign up. Everyone raised their hands. The soldier laughed mischievously, and gave everyone a piece of paper. On it was written the word, conscription. He said, "Take this paper to the training camp in the north of the city and take the recruit test. Only after you pass can you enlist, and you'll be a reserve soldier. You must complete the training before you can officially become a soldier. Otherwise, if you go to the battlefield, you'll be sending yourselves to death. You should know that our Purple Moon Army has always been famous for having low casualties." Everyone dispersed in an uproar. Although they weren't ultimate elites, they were still spiritual ocean and spiritual pedestal tier would-be elites, so how could they not even become ordinary soldiers? Ling Han also asked for 2 conscription orders. He kept one for himself, and handed the other to Zhu Xian'er, and said, "Let's go play too. Forget about Hun Yo, she'd be obedient." They set off towards the north of the city. After exiting the city, there was a mountain peak not far away, and at the foot of the mountain was a military camp. The flag of the Purple Moon Empire was erected, and a large group of people surrounded the entrance. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 741. If one wanted to enter the barracks, they first had to prove that they had the cultivation of the spiritual ocean tier. Those who couldn't reach this level wouldn't even have the chance to take the test. Ling Han walked over, and was surprised to find that there were actually a few elites among those who came to join the army. There were 4 people in total. The oldest was an old man who was about 60 years old, and had the cultivation of the spiritual infant tier. Next was a middle-aged brawny man who had also reached the spiritual infant tier. Next was a young man who looked to be close to 30 years old. His cultivation was slightly weaker, only in the flower blossom tier. The last was a beautiful young girl who was also in the flower blossom tier. Compared to the others who only had the cultivation of the spiritual ocean and spiritual pedestal tier, the four of them naturally stood out like cranes among chickens, appearing extremely eye-catching. Ling Han cultivated an ancient technique, so his cultivation level wasn't obvious. However, Zhu Xian'er's high-level flower blossom tier cultivation was similarly eye-catching. Thankfully, she had disguised herself. Although she was still very beautiful, she wasn't as devastatingly beautiful as before, or else everyone here would go crazy for her. Those who reached the standard entered the barracks. After Ling Han released his aura slightly, he naturally entered as well. Hunyo was temporarily settled in the resting room, and she sat cross-legged with Rabbit, beginning to eat and drink to her heart's content. A middle-aged man walked out. He had the cultivation of the spiritual infant tier, and his whole body exuded an iron-blooded and stern aura. Obviously, he had experienced who knew how many cruel battles. One look from him would make one's heart cold and their legs weak. Our Purple Moon Army doesn't want trash. He began. My name is Xiao Yongnian, your instructor. You have 2 months to convince me. Why should I agree to let you become soldiers? The main gate of the barracks is over there. Those who don't meet the requirements, I will immediately chase them out. Tell me, are you guys trash? Everyone was furious. Although there weren't many in the flower blossom tier here, they were at least in the spiritual ocean and spiritual pedestal tier. If they were trash, then the standard was really boundlessly high. No! Everyone shouted almost in unison. Very well, I also hope that none of you are trash, because I hate trash the most. Xiao Yongnian swept his gaze across the crowd. There are a total of 533 people here, but in my opinion, only 50 people can pass. From now on, I will use the strictest method to train you. In my eyes, there is no difference between men and women, no difference between old and young, only qualified and unqualified. Those who don't want to accept my training, get out immediately. This time, the arrogance of some people who wanted to leave was aroused. If they left now, wouldn't they become trash? Not a single person moved a single step. Very good, none of you want to be trash. But whether he's trash or not isn't up to you guys to decide, it's me. Xiao Yongnian sneered. As a soldier, the most important thing is to obey orders. Even if there's a volcano in front of you and you're told to walk forward, you can't retreat. Now, set up your horses. Zama, this was too low level, wasn't it? Who hadn't come from the refinement realm? Who hadn't practiced horse riding in stance before? Most people got into a horse stance, but a few people expressed disdain. Get lost. Xiao Yongnian immediately grabbed those people and threw them with both hands. Shio, 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 these people were thrown out from the main entrance, falling flat on their faces. Everyone's hearts trembled. This was a spiritual infant tier elite. Teng, 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 10 soldiers ran out from the barracks, only in the spiritual pedestal tier. They pushed out a small cart with talismans on it. Do you think Zama is easy? Xiao Yongnian grinned, and with a wave of his hand, the 10 soldiers immediately circled to the back of the crowd and stuck talismans on their backs. So heavy. Those who were stuck with talismans all exclaimed, and a few immediately sat down on the ground. This is a gravity spirit talisman. People of different cultivation levels will be stuck with different spirit talismans to ensure that it's within the range that you can bear, Xiao Yongnian said coldly. Xiao Yongnian said coldly, all of you, get up and stand properly again. Within 3 breaths, if there's still someone whose posture isn't right, I'll throw him out. The people on the ground hurriedly got up. Some people got into a horse stance, but some people sat down again. After 3 breaths, Xiao Yongnian indeed began to clear people again, throwing those who didn't meet the standards out of the barracks. Ling Han saw this and nodded inwardly. A martial artist's individual strength was very strong, but to become a soldier, it was useless to be strong alone. If the Purple Moon Empire failed to get rid of the 5 great sects, or failed to split open the skies, then he would have to take over this mission. Therefore, he became interested in commanding and training troops, and secretly learning from the Purple Moon Empire was undoubtedly the best way. He clearly crushed Xiao Yongnian in strength, but was methodical and well-behaved, not at all arrogant because of his talent. Everyone stuck their spiritual talismans on their talismans one by one. Because Ling Han had only revealed the cultivation level of the flower blossom tier, there was no one present who could see through his actual strength, so he naturally stuck his spiritual talisman on the level of the flower blossom tier. It was as if there was a mosquito resting on his body. What effect could this weight have on him? However, even if he stuck a spiritual infant tier spiritual talisman, it didn't matter. With his terrifying physique, it would at most feel like an extra egg. However, others didn't have such a physique, and had to activate origin power to resist. This wasn't like striking a palm or throwing a punch, but constantly resisting, which consumed a lot of origin power. Moreover, most martial artists didn't cultivate physical arts. This horse stance was fine for 2 to 4 hours, but if it was any longer, even if there was no lack of origin power, the physical body would feel tired. What made everyone's scalp numb was that they had to remain in horse stance like this for a day and a night. During this time, they couldn't rest, drink water, or eat. In only half a day, 17 people couldn't endure and were thrown out of the barracks, and when the day ended, a total of 49 people were cleared out. In just one day, almost 1/10 of the people were eliminated. Ling Han was learning. He was a genius in martial art and alchemy, but in terms of commanding an army and training soldiers, he was still a blank piece of paper, constantly absorbing experience. Actually, establishing a nation was still very beneficial. Power of the nation could greatly increase battle prowess, and also speed up cultivation. Although he advanced very quickly now, that was because he had gone through it once in his last life. After advancing into the immortal level, even if he was an exceptional genius, he definitely wouldn't be able to maintain this kind of advancement. Let Fatty Ma hold on for now. If he can't do it, I'll step up, but even if I reach the immortal level, I'll have to consider establishing my own nation to speed up the pace of my cultivation. Establishing a nation in the immortal level was naturally more difficult, because everyone knew the benefits of establishing a nation. Naturally, those with a bit of strength would fight to establish a nation, and the competition would be extremely fierce. Chapter 742. 10 days later, half of the people were eliminated, and it was hard to say whether there would still be 50 people left here after 2 months. However, it was in these 10 days that those who remained were not only people with better perseverance and strength, but also had preliminary cultivation of military discipline. Although they still couldn't compare to the veterans, they showed extremely good signs. After a month, the elimination rate dropped by a large margin, and there were still 100 people left. 3 days later, all of you will be divided into 10 small teams to carry out a mission. I will give you grades, and the team with the worst score will be eliminated, Xiao Yongnian said. Everyone was shocked, and even a little unconvinced. If I were to be divided into a team full of lousy teammates, then wouldn't I also be implicated? This is a test of your unity and cooperation. If you can't even cooperate as a team, how can you even talk about integrating into an army? Xiao Yongnian snorted. I'd rather choose a teammate with good teamwork than a lone hero. Ling Han nodded inwardly. Back then, the 100 veterans brought by the Lunar King only had the cultivation of the deity transformation tier, but 100 people combined could block the aftermath of a shattering void tier-level battle, which was simply terrifying. This was the result of unity. Of course, this 100-man team definitely used some kind of formation to fuse their power and defense together, or else it would also be unimaginable. If I could secretly learn this formation, it wouldn't be too bad, Ling Han said inwardly. Their mission this time was to annihilate a group of mountain bandits. In fact, those mountain bandits previously had a proper business, and were a deity transformation tier force. Under the sweep of the Purple Moon Empire's army, the deity transformation tier ancestor was killed, but the others chose to surrender. However, they were recently secretly instigated by the 5 great sects, and entered the complicated mountainous area to become mountain bandits, coming out from time to harm the common people. Their goal was obviously to destroy the Purple Moon Empire's power of the nation. If the people had no way to live, the power of the nation was poison. This kind of remnant force that only had a few spiritual infant tier elites left obviously couldn't make the Purple Moon Empire get serious, so it became the training target for their group of recruits. To be honest, even if the deity transformation tier ancestor of this band of mountain bandits was still alive, Ling Han would still be able to easily wipe them out by himself. However, this time, in order to cultivate their teamwork, Ling Han did not plan to show off his true strength, and decided to obediently remain his flower blossom tier. They were taught a formation that could fuse the power of 10 people and achieve 50% of the effect. Don't say it was only 50% of the effect, but if they joined forces and attacked together, the more people there were, the worse the effect would be. Otherwise, as long as there were enough people, wouldn't a body refining tier elite be able to kill a shattering void tier elite? In reality, only heaven tier elites could rely on numbers to kill shattering void tier elites. If it was deity transformation tier, then no matter how many of them there were, it would only be a small matter, and shattering void tier elites could kill them with their aura alone. Therefore, to be able to use half of the power of 10 people was simply terrifying. There were only 3 days' time. 3 days later, they would rely on this formation to fight against that band of mountain bandits. It was said that there were as many as 4 spiritual infant tier elites, exceeding the number of 2 in their 100-man team. Everyone was trembling with fear and worked hard to cultivate, or else they wouldn't just be eliminated, but would also lose their lives. Each team had the strongest person act as the eye of the formation, combining the power of the other 9 people, with him taking the lead in battle. Ling Han was the strongest, so he naturally acted as the captain and the eye of the formation. The strength of each team was very balanced. For example, if 2 spiritual infant tier elites were individually strong, the team members they were assigned to would be inferior to other teams in terms of overall strength. Zhu Xian'er obviously couldn't be assigned to Ling Han's team. There were only a total of 6 martial artists above the flower blossom tier, so of course, everyone had to lead a team, as the remaining 4 teams didn't have any flower blossom tier elites overseeing them. However, they didn't have to fight against spiritual infant tier elites either. Each team had a predetermined mission, and the weaker teams were just miscellaneous soldiers, which wouldn't affect their results. 3 days later, they set off. That band of mountain bandits wasn't far from them, only half a day's journey away. When they arrived, Xiao Yongnian commanded them to launch a strong attack. Ling Han also saw the Purple Moon Empire's attack method for the first time. Previously, he stood from the perspective of the 5 great sects, but now that he became a small soldier of the Purple Moon Empire and participated personally, the feeling was naturally different. A team composed of 10 people was practically invincible, which could display half of the 10 people's strength after superimposing. Even the weakest team had flower blossom tier battle prowess. They were like a hot knife through butter, forcing out the 4 spiritual infant tier elites of the mountain bandits, and launching a fierce battle. Ling Han's performance conformed to the norm, and only increased his battle prowess to around 2 stars of the spiritual infant tier, leading his 9-man team to launch a battle with the opponent. The battle lasted for nearly 3 days, and finally, this bandit force was completely annihilated. The army also paid the price of 7 dead and 18 injured. Considering that they only had a total of 100 people, and the number of elites was even fewer, this battle result was simply shocking. Even Ling Han nodded. This was indeed a classic example of the weak defeating the strong. If he had also brought so many people to battle, then unless he showed his might, the entire army would be annihilated. 7 people actually died. Xiao Yongnian's face was cold. You guys are really too useless. Of these 7 people, 3 died in Gong Fei Yang's team, 2 in Su Chengwen's team, and 2 in Jian Qizheng's team. Don't think I didn't notice. If you guys weren't greedy for achievements, would your team members have died? Gong Fei Yang and Su Chengwen were both in the spiritual pedestal tier, and when they heard these words, they naturally could only accept it, not daring to refute a spiritual infant tier elite. However, Jian Qizheng was that spiritual infant tier old man. He snorted, and said, sacrificing 3 spiritual ocean tier warriors as the price to kill 1 spiritual infant tier, isn't this worth it? What right do you have to decide who lives and who dies? Xiao Yongnian's expression was sinister. On this battlefield, your teammates are your only support, and you actually view them as expendable pawns. For someone like you, who dares to entrust their back to you? Scram, you're dismissed. What? Jian Qizheng almost jumped up. He was a dignified spiritual infant tier elite, fully deserving of being the top elite in this training camp, yet he was actually dismissed. How could he accept this? He flicked his sleeves, and said, if you want me to leave, that's fine, but bring me a complete level 8 cultivation technique. Do you think I'm willing to suffer here? Martial artists all fought alone and were used to being free and undisciplined, so they naturally weren't used to military life. Xiao Yongnian sneered, and said, you didn't pass the recruit training, and you still want a cultivation technique? Then you mean you're messing with me? Jian Qizheng said darkly. If you don't hand over the cultivation technique, I'll kill all of you. He drew out a black sword that looked like a demonic blade. There was actually a black aura twining around the sword's body, and it was extremely terrifying. Chapter 743. If it could be said that Zhao Luan had only wanted to kill Ling Han previously for the sake of his reputation, then from this moment onwards, Zhao Luan had finally taken Ling Han seriously, and viewed him as an enemy that he had to eliminate as soon as possible. He had to be as merciless as the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. Zhao Luan's expression was cold. He tapped out with a finger, and Gu Lingyu similarly turned into a stone statue, unable to move. Hee, no wonder you are so arrogant and dare to oppose me. So it turns out that you are living off a woman. Zhao Luan neared, and struck out another palm strike, pressing down on Ling Han. But I will let you know that there has never been an exception to the people that I want to kill. Peng, the palm strike landed, causing the ground to tremble slightly, but Ling Han had disappeared from the ground. N. Zhao Luan showed a sliver of surprise, because Ling Han had stretched out a palm to push the ground just then, and had used this force to escape his attack. Ling Han moved his limbs, and channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll. The wounds on his body were healing at a visible rate. His eyes shone, and he said, Zhao Luan, you are still not qualified to cover the sky with one hand. After such a long time, he had already recovered some of his power. Is that so? Zhao Luan immediately suppressed this bit of surprise. As long as Ling Han was still in the medium extreme, he would be able to easily suppress him. He moved, and his origin power condensed into a giant palm, which descended from the skies and struck out at Ling Han. This palm strike was not only extraordinarily fast, it was also extraordinarily large, and could not be dodged at all. Ling Han gathered up all his strength, and punched his fists skyward. However, the difference in power was too great, and he was mercilessly knocked down. Another mouthful of blood spurted out. But under everyone's astonished gazes, he immediately crawled back to his feet, his fighting spirit soaring. Is this guy an unkillable war god? Everyone was stunned speechless. At first, a consummate level could crush a cultivator at the medium extreme, and there was a gap of a whole 8 stars, which could be resolved with a single strike. But Ling Han stood up again and again, and this refreshed everyone's understanding of him. As it turned out, a cultivator at the medium extreme could also be this strong. What kind of cultivation technique had this ant from a small world cultivated, or what kind of rare treasure had he obtained? Why was his battle prowess so strong, and why was his physique so powerful? Even Zhao Luan's greed was stirred. He realized that he had really underestimated the people of this small world. He thought that this small world was primitive and backward, and it was completely impossible for any rare treasures to appear. He was wrong. He definitely did not believe that anyone could be born like this. This had to be some kind of inheritance that Ling Han had obtained, an astonishing inheritance. He was going to die. Zhao Luan finally got serious. His palm struck out again, and divine patterns rippled, interweaving with a frightening might. Ling Han roared loudly, and used the earth-overturning seal. He activated the Eye of Truth, and counterattacked. Pang! It was only a single exchange, and he was once again sent flying by the shockwave. To say nothing of the fact that Zhao Luan was a 4-star genius, even if he wasn't, the gap of 8 sub-minor levels was not something that Ling Han could make up for with his current strength. But his physique was too strong. Taking a direct hit only caused a few cracks to appear on his skin, but his godly bones were still unscathed. This was easy. He channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and his wounds instantly healed quickly. Everyone's eyes bulged in shock. They had never seen anyone with such a strong physique before. So be it if your physique was strong, but the problem was that even your recovery ability was so freakish. What could they do then? Unless they could severely wound Ling Han with a single strike, if it was only a light injury, he could completely recover over and over again. It would be useless no matter how much you beat him. Ha 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 ha. Amidst a long laugh, a figure leaped down from the mountain peak, and just happened to stand between Ling Han and Zhao Luan. Sha Yuan he opened his folding fan with a schwa, fanned himself twice, and said, Zhao Luan, where's my wager? Zhao Luan instantly looked angry, and said, do you think I'll blame you? That's not necessarily the case. As long as the wager doesn't enter your pocket, you won't be able to rest easy, Sha Yuan said with a smile. Even if you're a blood brother, you still have to settle your debts clearly. Hurry up and bring the wager over. Zhao Luan knew that Sha Yuan was deliberately interfering to protect Ling Han. However, how could he allow Sha Yuan to do as he wished? He coldly said, Sha Yuan, don't think that I don't know what you're planning. What am I planning? Sha Yuan asked with a smile. Zhao Luan took a deep breath, and said, I'll give you 2 pieces of white cloud star metal. Stay out of today's matter. Sha Yuan's strength and status were all no weaker than his. If Sha Yuan was determined to stir up trouble, then it would really be a bit difficult for him to deal with him. Thus, he didn't mind giving Sha Yuan another piece of white cloud star metal to prevent Sha Yuan from interfering. 2 pieces of white cloud star metal. Sha Yuan couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. If it was just 1 piece of white cloud star metal, then it could only be added to a god tool to increase the quality of the god tool. However, if there were 2 pieces of white cloud star metal, then it would be enough to forge a complete weapon. That was a level 7 god tool. Just thinking about it was enough to excite him. One had to realize that starting from level 5, there was pitifully little godly metal. He only thought about it for a moment before immediately coming to a decision. He said, fine. After saying this, he retreated to the side, acting as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Zhao Luan's gaze once again landed on Ling Han. This person had caused him to lose another piece of white cloud star metal, causing his killing intent to burn even more intensely. At the same time, his desire to obtain that inconceivably powerful secret from Ling Han grew even stronger. Ling Han glanced at Sha Yuan, and the favorable impression he had of this person naturally vanished into thin air. He drew his divine sword and clenched his left hand into a palm. He was going to defend his dignity. Meow. Who dares to touch even my cat slave? The large white cat appeared, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws at Zhao Luan. Headmaster Fu's pet beast. Zhao Luan was astonished. The lowly commoners of this small world were truly mysterious. In just a short few days, they had actually managed to form connections with the Left Minister, Headmaster Fu, and the Alchemy Institution. Pay! Only trash like humans can be my cat's slave, the large white cat said in an extremely haughty manner. Hee, for the sake of Lord Fu, I'll spare your life. Zhao Luan flicked his finger again, intending to restrain the white cat. Xiao. The white cat's figure flashed, its speed incredibly fast. Zhao Luan was astonished. This kind of speed was slightly beyond his expectations. However, that was all. After all, his cultivation level was still at the low extreme. In just 3 moves, the large white cat had been subdued by Zhao Luan. Zhao Luan's attacks were also extremely well controlled. He had only immobilized the large white cat, and hadn't injured it. Detestable human, hurry up and release me, the large white cat wailed, appearing to be unable to restrain his fury. Everyone was astonished. The left minister and headmaster Fu were 2 elites of the heavenly body tier, yet Ling Han was actually able to form a good relationship with these 2 great forces at the same time. This was truly unimaginable. Even Zhao Luan felt slightly weak. If it wasn't for the fact that Sha Yuan was still being moved by his own interests, then it would mean that there were 3 great forces of the heavenly body tier that were helping Ling Han. However, when he thought of the supreme inheritance that Ling Han might possess, he immediately strengthened his resolve. He definitely had to succeed. Die. He waved a palm at Ling Han. You're the one who's going to die. Ling Han roared in fury. His sword and palm moved simultaneously, and he began his counterattack. Cell phone reading is even more refreshing. Chapter 744. Ling Han's expression was solemn. A heaven-tier warrior, and a high-level one at that, far surpassed his current battle prowess. If he took it head-on, he'd probably be heavily injured. Of course, if he only took 1 move, he definitely wouldn't die. After all, his physique and recovery power were too strong. Xian Er, come here. Ling Han said. He obviously couldn't hide in the Black Tower alone. Fortunately, although Hun Yo and Rabbit followed, they stayed far away and didn't come over. Presumably, even if the 7th elder of the Yu family came, he'd be ignored. Zhu Xian'er walked over slowly, not daring to move too fast for fear of arousing the 7th elder of the Yu family's reaction. The 7th elder of the Yu family wouldn't take Ling Han or Zhu Xian'er seriously. A mere spiritual infant flower blossom tier warrior, he could crush them with 1 finger. He was still searching for the whereabouts of that mysterious person, and said, since you're not willing to come out, then I won't be polite. His raised right hand instantly pressed down on Ling Han. Pa! A figure flew up and crashed heavily into the mountain bandit's lair. Peng, 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 it directly broke through a dozen houses before stopping. That was the 7th elder of the Yu family, and he was actually sent flying with a slap. Hiss! The old man struggled to get up, feeling that at least a dozen bones in his body were broken, and now he used origin power to forcibly reconnect them, or else he wouldn't even be able to get up now. Who was this? It was too strong, sending him flying with a slap, and he didn't even have time to react. He focused his gaze and saw a masked person appear where he originally stood, but even if the face was masked, one could tell from the figure that it was a woman, slender and graceful, perfect, if it weren't for the fact that it was a bit flat. Everyone was both surprised and delighted. Although they still didn't know the identity of this masked woman, being enemies with the 7th elder of the Yu family should be a good thing, right? Ling Han's gaze swept over the masked woman's extremely flat chest, and blurted out, Hai Nyo, there really weren't many women with such strong strength who still had such a flat chest. If you dare speak nonsense again, I'll kill you, the masked woman said coldly. Ling Han bared his teeth and said, you've recovered your memory. If it was Hai Nyo, then she was adorably stupid, but if it was Hellion Sun Shui, then she was an elite of the heaven tier. Looking at the current situation, it was obviously the latter. But why did he help? Could it be that she felt that it would be more satisfying to kill him with her own hands? Speaking of which, they didn't have any enmity, right? It was just that he had tricked her once. It had been so long, why not let go of the enmity with a smile? After all, they had lived together for so long. Helian Xuanxue did not answer. She merely stared coldly at the seventh elder of the Yu clan, and said, I told you to scram just now, but you didn't, and now you still want to leave. The seventh forefather of the Yu clan cupped his fists and said, Honored sir, this child killed a member of my Yu clan, so it is reasonable for this old man to seek revenge on him. Since you are protecting him, I will let go of this grudge. How about it? Humph. Helian Sun Shui seemed to have a bellyful of pent-up anger, and at this moment, finally found a point to vent. She looked at the seventh forefather of the Yu clan coldly, killing intent swirling around her. Ling Han bared his teeth. He felt that this anger should be directed at him, but he didn't know what was wrong with this Hainyo's brain that she actually let go of him, the main target, and shifted her anger to the seventh forefather of the Yu clan. I wish you good luck, he said in his heart. The seventh forefather of the Yu clan was also furious. They were both high-level heaven-tier warriors, and he had already lowered his stance so much, and was even slapped by her, and she still wanted to do something. He flicked his sleeve and said, Honored sir, this old man is also not to be trifled with. He drew out a green stone tablet, on which there were densely woven vein-like patterns, full of an ancient aura. Ling Han made a sound of surprise, knowing that this was definitely an antique. The technique of forging spirit tools had long been lost, and the current martial artists all nurtured their weapons, injecting their own martial art will and origin power into them. Over time, it naturally became a spirit tool, passing down the same lineage as the martial artist, and unleashing the strongest power. But in ancient times, spirit tools were all forged by blacksmiths, and the vein-like patterns were engraved on them. This meant that the spirit tool could unleash the strongest power in anyone's hands, and it could even surpass the martial artist's tier. A heaven-tier elite did not use the spirit tool that he nurtured himself, but instead drew out an ancient spirit tool, which meant that the power of this spirit tool was definitely above his own spirit tool. It couldn't be small. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a bit itchy, wanting to use the heaven transformation bowl to collect this stone tablet. Presumably, the rock spirit would definitely be greedy. Helian Xuanxue, however, was indifferent, and put one hand behind her back, only stretching out her right hand, and said, To deal with you, one hand is enough. The seventh elder of the Yu clan was seething with anger. He had been famous for a long time, and was also a top-notch existence in the world among heaven-tier elites. Anyone who saw him would have to respectfully salute him, but now he was actually looked down upon like this, making him feel extremely humiliated. He drew out the stone tablet. Wang, this stone tablet immediately flew up, and shone with a great light in the sky. It also rapidly enlarged, becoming the size of a small mountain, and then smashed towards Helian Xuanxue. There were no tricks, just one word, smash. Helian Xuanxue revealed a slight look of astonishment. She could sense that this stone tablet was now extraordinarily heavy, probably even more frightening than a mountain peak. The artifact forging technique of the ancients was truly miraculous. This was probably a real mountain peak that had been forcefully refined and shrunk, and when it was used, it would be directly used to smash people. When the weight reached a certain level, then smashing down would be the strongest attack in the world. She snorted, and her body turned into lightning, and she charged out with incredible speed. So fast. Ling Han only felt a blur before his eyes, unable to catch Helian Xuanxue's trace at all. One had to know that after he cultivated the thunderclap ninth heaven, his speed could barely compare to heaven-tier elites, so how terrifying would the heaven-tier Helian Xuanxue's speed be if she successfully cultivated the thunderclap ninth heaven? Even if the shattering void tier was high and mighty, her speed would at least be comparable, right? Helian Xuanxue instantly charged in front of the seventh elder of the Yu clan, and her slender snow-white hand struck out, pressing directly onto the other's forehead. The seventh elder of the Yu clan hurriedly raised his hand to parry, his face filled with shock. Helian Xuanxue's speed greatly exceeded his expectations. It was too fast, so fast that he almost didn't even have time to react. Peng, 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 the two heaven-tier elites fought fiercely, but it was the seventh elder of the Yu clan who was completely taking the beating, unable to retaliate at all. Strong, really strong. Ling Han thought. Helian Xuanxue was a genius of the sea race, and not only did her origin power advance into the heaven tier, her physical arts were also not the slightest bit inferior. Such a powerful dual cultivator naturally crushed origin power cultivators of the same tier. Now that she had cultivated a mystical power, it was like adding wings to a tiger. A battle of the same tier would be enough to show how terrifying the might of a mystical power was. The seventh elder of the Yu clan was extremely furious. He actually couldn't even touch Helian Xuanxue's side, and could only be ruthlessly beaten up. He was so furious that he summoned that stone tablet over, and smashed it down on himself. Do you dodge or not? If you don't dodge, I'll smash you too. Chapter 745. A Beautiful Romance. This move was despicable, but it was very effective. Helian Xuanxue naturally would not perish together with the opponent, and her figure immediately flickered, avoiding the range of the stone tablet's descent. Seeing that this move was effective, the seventh elder of the Yu family could not help but cackle strangely, driving the stone tablet towards Helian Xuanxue. He naturally knew that with Helian Xuanxue's speed, he could not kill her, but he could drive her away. What he wanted was Ling Han's life. Helian Xuanxue seemed to have great misgivings, unwilling to fight head-on with the seventh elder of the Yu family. Otherwise, with the strength of her physique, which was even above Ling Han's, she was completely qualified to fight this kind of gravity-type spirit tool. This made Ling Han click his tongue in wonder, unable to understand. Could it be that the amnesia back then still had an effect on Helian Xuanxue now, making her hands and feet bound when she fought? The seventh elder of the Yu family attacked continuously, and Helian Xuanxue retreated continuously, instantly reversing the situation. Sir, this old man will not lower himself to your level. If you leave now, this old man will pretend that nothing has happened, the seventh elder of the Yu family said. He indeed did not want to form a death feud with such an elite. Helian Xuanxue only snorted coldly, and lightly clapped her hands, but a wave of origin power swept up, with vein-like patterns flashing, extremely terrifying power. Then this old man is too lazy to talk nonsense with you. The seventh elder of the Yu family sneered. He suddenly turned around, and fixed his gaze on Ling Han. First, I'll kill you, a junior. This was the goal of his trip. This person had the 10,000-year treasured pearl, and he must obtain it. Of course, killing Ling Han to avenge the Yu family's descendants was also a reason, but compared to the 10,000-year treasured pearl, this was just in passing. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "Evildoer, this seat will take you." He threw out the heaven transformation bowl. Wang, the treasured bowl shone, and vein-like patterns came to life, emitting resplendent light. Hong Long Long, the stone tablet actually flew rapidly towards the heaven transformation bowl, and in the process, the stone tablet was also infinitely shrinking. What? The seventh elder of the Yu clan was shocked. He felt that he was losing his connection with this spirit tool. With a roar, he charged towards Ling Han. He had obtained this spiritual tool in an ancient tomb, and it had helped him kill several experts of the same level. It was his greatest trump card, and he could not afford to lose it. However, the stone bowl that Ling Han had summoned could actually affect and absorb the stone tablet. This caused him to be both shocked and overjoyed. If he could get his hands on this bowl, wouldn't he gain another treasure? His face was filled with greed as he reached out with his right hand to grab Ling Han. Humph. A disdainful snort sounded from behind him. Oh no, hurriedly said in his heart. Before he could finish his thought, he felt a pain in his chest, and his entire person was once again sent flying. He could only see Helian Xuanxue's figure becoming smaller and smaller in his eyes. Sure enough, he was sent flying again. This time, he wasn't so lucky. Helian Xuanxue chased after him and began to beat him up. Without the protection of a spiritual tool, how could he be a match for Helian Xuanxue, the ruler of the sea race? She cultivated both origin power and physical arts, and on top of the secret skills of the sea race, her battle prowess was absolutely terrifying. In just a short while, the seventh elder of the Yu clan was defeated, and could only flee. A heaven-tier elite was a heaven-tier elite, after all. He burned his life force source, and his speed was ridiculously fast, reaching a level comparable to Helian Xuanxue. But this kind of loss was irreversible. What was consumed was his lifespan, at least losing a few decades of his life. However, compared to being killed on the spot by Helian Xuanxue, losing a few decades of his life naturally didn't matter. If Helian Xuanxue wanted to chase, she could also burn her life force source, and she would definitely be able to catch up. But she was naturally unwilling, and only chased for 2 steps before stopping, turning back to look for Ling Han. "Milord, thank you very much for your help. The Purple Moon Empire will definitely have a thank you gift, but if you want to harm Ling Han, you'll have to pass through me first." Xiao Yong Nian blocked in front of Helian Xuanxue. This was the belief of the Purple Moon Empire. As the boss, he had to protect the underling, or else how would the underling work for you? Helian Xuanxue reached out and brushed Xiao Yong Nian aside. She stopped in front of Ling Han, her gaze flickering as if she was hesitating about something. "Hai Niu, if there's anything, we can sit down and talk slowly. There's nothing that can't be discussed." Ling Han smiled. He already put away the stone tablet. The rock spirit was about to break through to the deity transformation tier, and if he could refine this stone tablet, heaven tier wouldn't be far. Only then could he be considered a hired thug. Helian Xuanxue reached out and picked up Ling Han. "Xiao," she turned and left. "Silly Niu, silly Niu." Hu Niu jumped out and hurriedly chased after her. She didn't care about anything else, but she definitely wouldn't allow anyone to snatch Ling Han away. "Little girl, wait for Uncle Rabbit." Rabbit hurriedly chased after her. Zhu Xian'er wasn't slow either, but her cultivation was the weakest, so she could only fall behind. Xiao Yong Nian struggled to climb up, but felt a pain in his chest. How could he catch his breath in one go? Instantly, he sat down on the ground. None of the new soldiers dared to chase. That was a heaven-tier elite, and if they chased after her, wouldn't they be courting death? The fact that she didn't start a massacre was already a mercy beyond the law. "Don't think your life is too long, return to camp." Xiao Yong Nian also knew that it was unrealistic to let these new soldiers chase after him. The only plan now was to report the news. Although it was only a new soldier, the Purple Moon Empire definitely wouldn't allow anyone to bully one of their own. An elite would definitely rush over, perhaps a general, or even a king. "Xiao," Helian Xuanxue grabbed Ling Han and advanced continuously. Her speed was astonishing, and even if she was grabbing Ling Han, she didn't slow down much. After walking for a long time, she finally stopped and threw him onto the ground. Ling Han didn't hide in the Black Tower. If Helian Xuanxue wanted to kill him, she wouldn't have brought him running. He dusted off his butt, stood up, and said, "Your temper has grown again." Helian Xuanxue glared at him fiercely, and suddenly struck out violently. Peng, 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 it was a beating. Similarly, although her strikes were heavy, none of them were killing moves, so Ling Han only used all his strength to protect his handsome face. As for the rest, just beat her. He just felt it was strange that this Hai Niu was becoming more and more abnormal. After Helian Xuanxue was done beating him, she finally stopped. She took off her cloak, and there was actually an infant wrapped on her back. At the moment, he was sleeping soundly, and even stuck out a finger in his mouth, sucking on it, looking very cute. No wonder she didn't forcefully clash with that stone tablet earlier, probably because she was worried about hurting the infant. Otherwise, with her strength and temper, so what if she forcefully took it? Could this be her son? Helian Xuanxue hugged the infant for a while, then handed him over to Ling Han, and said, "Take good care of him. If he loses a single hair, I'll kill you 10,000 times." Ling Han subconsciously took it, then scratched his head, and said, "I don't seem to have the habit of raising children for other people." Was this Hai Nyo's head smacked silly again, actually wanting him to raise a child? "This is your son," Helian Xuanxue said angrily. Chapter 746. This is your son. Pooh. Ling Han instantly spluttered, and said, Hey, we're familiar, but you can't talk nonsense. I'm still a virgin, how could I have a son? You want me to raise a child for you, and it's fine if you want me to be a good person, but I can't be a fool. Helian Sun Shui was furious, and grabbed him by the chest and lifted him up. She said, "Are you blind? Don't you see that your son looks almost exactly the same as you?" Ling Han thought carefully. This was really hard to say. Because in this life, he really hadn't looked in the mirror many times, and his understanding of his own appearance had always remained at the level of his previous life. He couldn't help but grit his teeth. If he had a child with Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and Zhu Xian heir in the future, would it be counted as his, or his predecessors? What a headache, this debt seemed to be a bit hard to calculate. Helian Sun Shui was even more furious. You dared to be absent-minded at this time. She swung Ling Han, and said, "Listen, this is your son, take good care of him for me. If I find that he's missing a hair when I return, I'll chop you up and feed you to the fishes." Ling Han waved his hand, and said, "All right, I'll believe that this is really my son for now, this is your son in the first place." Helian Sun Shui interrupted. Ling Han sighed, and said, "How come I don't remember doing that with you?" Helian Sun Shui's pretty face blushed, but with her face covered, she wasn't afraid of being seen by others. She said, "Did you forget, when you obtained the Thunderclap 9th Heaven mystical power?" Ling Han was suddenly shocked. At that time, this silly girl charged into the area of lightning, and he wanted to pull her back, but in the end, he was also swept in by the lightning. Their clothes were torn apart, and then they were entangled together. Could it be that, at that time, he had accidentally done this girl? Fuck, this brother's virgin body. Ling Han screamed in his heart. It was his first time in this life, and he had actually lost it in a blur. He stammered, how could it be so accurate? I got pregnant in one go. You think I want to? Helian Xuanxue was annoyed again. She raised her fist and wanted to hit him, but she endured it in the end. Not long after I returned to the sea race, I found out that I was pregnant, so I hid and prepared to secretly give birth to the child. However, the news was still leaked, and now I'm being hunted down by my family and the Xianyu royal family. Otherwise, I would need you to take care of the child. Ling Han didn't ask why the other party didn't abort the child. His face was full of shock as he carefully looked at his son, full of respect. He has a son. In his previous life, he had been obsessed with alchemy all his life. Although countless beauties had thrown themselves at him, he had never given them a second glance. Now, a child with his bloodline was in his arms. It was as if some kind of spiritual connection had been formed, making him extremely excited. I have a son. He raised his head and looked at Helian Xuanxue. I'm very sorry that I only gave birth to one. I didn't let you have both a son and a daughter. Helian Xuanxue said through gritted teeth, still full of hatred. Ling Han was overjoyed, and said without hesitation, it's fine, we can have another one in the future. Helian Xuanxue was furious, and once again grabbed Ling Han, saying, you still want to have sex with me? What a female Tyrannosaurus. Ling Han secretly admired himself. He actually became a dragon rider warrior. He patted Helian Xuanxue's hand, and said seriously, you've already given birth to a son for me. Of course, you're a member of my old Ling family. You're not allowed to run around in the future, and take good care of the child for me." "How domineering." Hellion Xuanxue snorted coldly, and said, "Why do you think I came to find you? If I wasn't being chased by two great forces, you wouldn't be able to see me in this lifetime. Now, take good care of the child. I know you have a spirit tool that can contain living things. With the child at your place, no one will know. I'll draw the pursuers away. If I don't die, you have to hand the child to me, and we'll never see each other again." "What nonsense is this?" Ling Han was also annoyed. "You didn't give birth to the child alone. I don't care how I fucked you back then, since you're my woman, and even gave birth to a son for me, I'll watch you die." Hellion Sun Shui was slightly moved, but immediately said, "Don't act on impulse. You have no idea how powerful the Hellion and Xianyu royal families are. Just the Shattering Void tier elites alone number over 30, and Heaven tier elites number as many as several hundred. It's only one family, not two." They were indeed very powerful, but thinking that the 5 great sects had at least 100 Shattering Void tier elites, Ling Han didn't care. He said, "You only know that I have a spirit tool that can contain living things, but you don't know how powerful this spirit tool is. Alright, don't resist my divine sense wrapping, I'll bring you in to experience it. Hee, after entering the Black Tower, you'll just obediently take care of the child for me." If she had a choice, Hellion Xuanxue obviously wouldn't want to be separated from her son. She hesitated, and said, "Alright, you come." Ling Han wrapped Hellion Xuanxue and his son with his divine sense, and Xiao, the three entered the Black Tower together. "What?" Hellion Xuanxue was shocked. How could this space be so big? This was practically a mystery realm. "How is it?" Ling Han said with a smile. "When I also enter here, the spatial spirit tool will turn into a mustard seed, and even Shattering Void tier elites can't distinguish it. It'll be absolutely safe here." Hellion Xuanxue came to a sudden realization. No wonder the first time she discovered Ling Han and struck him, he suddenly disappeared. So it turned out that he had such a secret treasure. "Alright, I'll stay here first, hide for 10 or 20 years, and leave when things calm down," she said with a nod. "Yeah." The child suddenly woke up, and when he discovered that he was being carried by a stranger, he didn't cry, and only stared at Ling Han with his big, clear eyes. He even stretched out his chubby little hand, grinned, and grabbed at Ling Han's face. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a surge of fatherly love, and took the initiative to stick his face to his son, letting him grab it. The little guy immediately laughed, and rubbed Ling Han's face as if he was a toy. Ling Han smiled, and said, "The little guy's strength is really great, and he'll definitely be successful in the future." This wasn't boasting, the little guy's strength was indeed great, definitely not below the 9th layer of body refining tier. Hellion Xuanxue said proudly, "That's natural, his true dragon bloodline is even above mine." As expected of the old Ling family's descendant. Ling Han directly ignored her words. Hellion Xuanxue's pretty face twitched. This man was really shameless. Her son obviously possessed true dragon bloodline, and that was why he had such terrifying strength, so how could a human do it? "Woo-ah!" The little guy suddenly cried. Ling Han was at a loss, and said, "What's wrong?" Hellion Xuanxue rolled her eyes at him, and said, "Your son is hungry." She carried the little guy over, and was just about to lift up her clothes when she glared at Ling Han, and said, "Why aren't you turning around? Che, it's not like it hasn't happened before, and it's so flat, who would think?" Ling Han spread his hands, but turned around as told. Hellion Xuanxue ground her teeth, wanting to kill again. Chapter 747. If one were to say that the 9th king was courageous, even a mouse could make her scream in fear, but if one were to say that she was timid, she would even do something like falsely conveying her imperial will. And in Ling Han's eyes, she was only a lonely little girl. She was lonely. Not to mention that she was one of the 9 kings, a person of high status and authority, and also had the protection of an empress who viewed her as a sore spot. She was actually very lonely, and did not have any playmates of the same age. The other 8 kings and Empress Luan Xing were all busy with cultivation all day, and did not have the time to play with her at all. Moreover, the guards by her side were all respectful to her, obedient to her orders, and could not possibly become her friend. Thus, when Ling Han saw that she did not kneel, she instead praised him as, "Ling Han is still the one with backbone." That was because she had seen too many people who had knelt to her. This was also why Shui Yanyu was able to become friends with her so quickly. That was because she yearned for a close friend of the same age. In the company of the 9th king, Ling Han had a good tour of the imperial capital. Only when the sun had set did the 9th king reluctantly let him go. When Ling Han returned to the academy, he saw that Li Weiwei and Ji Yun had already arrived. The 2 girls could not suppress the excitement on their faces. "You two are grinning so widely that your lips are almost touching your ears. You have come because you have received the wager," Ling Han said with a smile. "Hee, I went to collect the debt at the first instant. How could they dare to refuse?" Li Weiwei was very proud of herself. She drew out a black card and tossed it at Ling Han. "This is a true origin stone card issued by the Empire. You can exchange it for true origin stones at the Bank of the Empire at any time. It is very convenient. You can take out as much as you want." Ling Han nodded. 4,000,000 true origin stones was not a small sum. Most likely, even the Bank of the Empire might not have such a sum. However, he was also an emperor, and was well aware that this virtual currency could be magnified a good few times to promote the development of commerce. In any case, if it was only for cultivation, how much could this thing be used up in a day? Most of the time, true origin stones were only used as a kind of hard currency. With the backing of the nation, they naturally could issue them in excess. It was no wonder that Li Weiwei and Ji Yun were incredibly excited. They had only invested 3,000 true origin stones each, but it had first increased tenfold, and then increased 100-fold. Now, each of them had a huge wealth of 3 million. In truth, 3,000 true origin stones was already a very large sum of wealth. When the 2 girls had taken it out, they had felt pained. Now that they had a huge wealth of 3 million, they were naturally overjoyed. Ling Han was also very excited. However, this kind of business could only be done once. Now that they knew how freakish he was, which gambling house would dare to give him such a huge payout in the future? He nodded internally. If he wanted to earn money in the future, he would have to return to alchemy. Now that he had enough capital, he could squander it on alchemy. Otherwise, he would become a pauper after concocting a few furnaces. "Oh, that's right. I heard that there was another person who bet on you to win. Added with our bet, it was more or less enough for the gambling house to spit out all the bets they had taken. They did not earn a single cent." Li Weiwei laughed loudly. Ling Han was surprised. There was actually someone who was supporting him. Who could it be? A cold yet beautiful face immediately appeared in his mind. Shui Yanyu was probably the only one who knew about his devilish side, and probably the only one who would support him. "I have gotten you an invitation to the auction. The time is the night after tomorrow. Don't miss it." Li Weiwei handed him an invitation. Ling Han accepted it, nodded, and said, "I will definitely be there on time." Only then did Li Weiwei smile in satisfaction, and leave with Ji Yun. Because they had made a small fortune, they naturally did not care about the meager income from selling ingredients. The 2 women only asked him for some ingredients for their own use. After eating these things, they would become addicted like spiritual meat. Not long after the 2 women left, Shui Yanyu arrived. "Wife, you finally remembered your man," Ling Han said with a smile. Who is your wife?" Shui Yanyu immediately blushed, and rolled her eyes at him fiercely. "Tsk, you are so thin-skinned," but I like it. Ling Han walked over, and was practically pressed up against Shui Yenyu. Shui Yenyu could only retreat, but the moment she retreated, Ling Han advanced. Very soon, she was pressed up against the wall, and there was no way out. Her pretty face was completely red, and she asked, "What do you want to do?" "I want to." Ling Han nodded, and his whole body pressed down on Shui Yenyu's graceful and delicate body, causing her body to tense up, appearing to be incredibly nervous. At first, Shui Yenyu didn't understand what he was saying, but after thinking about it for a moment, she finally understood. Instantly, she rolled her eyes. This guy was usually serious, but who would have thought that he was actually so lewd in private? "Have you decided to bear my children?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "I have a serious matter to discuss with you," Shui Yenyu said with a serious expression. "I'm also talking to you about a serious matter." Ling Han's large hand was already exploring Shui Yenyu's delicate body, and he said, "It's only been half a year, but it seems like you've grown slightly bigger again." "Pervert." Shui Yenyu's pretty face was extremely beautiful. Ling Han laughed loudly, and asked, "What serious matter do you have to discuss with me? Let go of me before we talk. Let's talk like this. I have serious matters to discuss, and you can talk about your serious matters." How could Ling Han possibly retreat? He had already occupied 2 high grounds, and was currently measuring the measurements. Shui Yenyu's whole body went limp, and she didn't even have the strength to push Ling Han away. She could only fiercely roll her eyes at him. However, she was naturally very flirtatious, so rolling her eyes was no different from throwing flirtatious glances, which made Ling Han even more excited. "I've accepted a mission, and it can be completed by 2 people, so I came to ask you to come with me," she finally said. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly, and said, "Could it be that you missed me, and deliberately found an excuse to stay with me?" "Who missed you, you pervert?" Shui Yenyu naturally wouldn't admit it. Ling Han lifted her chin, and said, "Little girl, if you didn't miss me, why would you deliver yourself to me?" "Hee, you've already delivered yourself to me, so if I don't eat you up, wouldn't I be letting down your kind intentions?" He picked up Shui Yenyu, and walked into the house. Shui Yenyu was scared out of her wits. She was really afraid that Ling Han would cook her into cooked rice right now, so she hurriedly started to struggle. "If you don't want me to eat you up right now, that's fine too. However, you have to agree to a few conditions of mine," Ling Han said with a naughty grin. Shui Yenyu was helpless, and could only agree to Ling Han's humiliating conditions, causing her pretty face to remain flushed. "Now, can you tell me what mission you've accepted?" Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him, and then said, "To annihilate a group of pirates." She was panting, and there was a large hand moving about in her chest, causing her thoughts to be restless. She rolled her eyes, and said, "Can you stop for a moment?" "No." Ling Han shook his head sternly. "Have you forgotten the conditions you've agreed to me just now? This damn pervert." Shui Yenyu whimpered internally, but she had to admit that she actually liked this kind of feeling very much. She enjoyed it, but the reserved nature of a woman made her want to refuse, yet also welcome it. Students in the Shattering Void tier do not need to complete any missions, but starting from the low extreme division, they must complete a certain number of missions every year. Otherwise, they will be expelled from the school. Shui Yenyu forced herself to calm down. Chapter 748. "We have to inform the Purple Moon Empire," Ling Han said. Now, he and Ma Duo Bao were considered allies, though his strength wasn't worth mentioning. If the sea race suddenly launched an attack, and attacked from the front and back with the 5 great sects, the Purple Moon Empire was very likely to be overturned in one day. Since Hellion Sun Shui was also one of them, Ling Han explained the plan to split open the skies to her, making Hellion Sun Shui extremely shocked. She only wanted to unify the North Sea, and then gather the North Sea's power to resist the reckoning. She didn't expect Ling Han to have such great ambitions, wanting to split open the skies and raise the entire vast lands into the realm of gods. You don't have to worship me so much, just know it in your heart. I'm not a vain person, Ling Han said with a smile. In front of his own people, he didn't mind making a few jokes. Show off. Hellion Sun Shui rolled her eyes at him, quite flirtatious. If it weren't for her chest being too flat, she'd definitely be charming enough to drip water. Then let's first report to the Purple Moon Empire, and we'll return to the North region, Ling Han said. They'll fight to their heart's content in the Middle State, and will first unify the East, South, West, and North regions. If Ma Duobao wins, I'll give him the land and let him split open the skies, and if he can't, then I'll do it. Relatively speaking, the Middle State was the center of contention. The area of this state was larger than the 4 regions combined, but the 4 regions couldn't be underestimated. One had to know that the population of the desolate north was close to 1 billion, and the power of the nation of each country could forcibly produce a flower blossom tier warrior, which was still quite shocking. We'll use the countryside to surround the cities, Ling Han said with a smile. They exited the Black Tower and headed towards the training camp. After finding Xiao Yong Nian, Ling Han had him pass a letter to either the Flame King or the Lunar King. The letter stated that the sea race was very likely to dispatch troops, so that Ma Duobao could be prepared. Xiao Yong Nian was still somewhat loyal, staring at Hellion Sun Shui as if to capture her and put her on trial. Ling Han hurriedly smiled, and said, "This is my wife, the mother of my child, playing with me." Xiao Yong Nian couldn't help but have a strange expression on his face. He thought to himself, "You husband and wife are really strange. Aren't you afraid that others won't be able to take it when you're playing around like this?" However, since Hellion Sun Shui was a heaven-tier elite, he naturally did not dare to underestimate the weight of Ling Han's letter, and definitely had to hand it in. However, he was only a lieutenant, so it was impossible for him to meet the 8 princes directly. Thus, he could only pass this letter to the level of a general. Naturally, there would be important figures who would weigh the pros and cons and decide whether or not to pass it on. Ling Han made another secret trip back to the Restore Heaven Academy. After disguising himself, he contacted the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, telling them of his plans. He left behind a large number of alchemical pills, and called Yuan Chenghe, the Li siblings, and returned to the North region together. More than a month later, they returned to the Northern region. Ling Han already reached the peak of the spiritual infant tier, but he was not in a hurry to break through to the deity transformation tier. He planned to solidify his tier to the point where he could no longer advance, then break through and reach the pinnacle. On the other hand, Zhu Xian'er broke through to the spiritual infant tier, and the rock spirit was the first to break through to the deity transformation tier. With the power of a spirit of the 5 elements, once they broke through, they would be comparable to an existence at the peak of the deity transformation tier. Although they still could not defeat Ling Han, they were the 3rd strongest on their side. Yuan Chenghe and the others' cultivation speed was very fast. Following an alchemy emperor, how could they be afraid of not having enough alchemical pills to eat? If it were not for Ling Han's concern that the tier that relied solely on alchemical pills to advance would be unstable, Yuan Chenghe probably could already break through to the deity transformation tier. Even so, Yuan Chenghe reached the peak of the spiritual infant tier, the same tier as Ling Han. The Li siblings also reached the peak of the flower blossom tier, not in a hurry to break through to a higher tier. They did as Ling Han said, solidifying their foundations as much as possible. These were the backbone of Ling Han's founding, though they were a bit shabby now. Ling Han already had 2 level 10 spirit tools. When they arrived at the region wall, he casually took one out, and when it came into contact with the region wall, the spirit tool automatically activated and erected a screen of light, protecting them as they left without the slightest bit of influence. This was used to separate the 3 tiers of spiritual infant, deity transformation, and heaven tier. For shattering void tier, it was practically non-existent. The existence of the region wall prevents elites from communicating, causing the decline of martial art in the four regions, making it easier to control. Ling Han sighed. If the five great sects did not exist, the martial art of the vast lands should be flourishing. Reaching the shattering void tier would allow one to enter the realm of immortals, no longer needing to consume the resources of this realm, thus giving birth to even more elites. This was something the five great sects created in 10,000 years. At least in his last life, the region wall did not exist. Perhaps it had something to do with Zi Shuexian's betrayal, which made the five great sects more strictly control the communication between regions. After entering the North region, their speed decreased, and it wouldn't be long before they returned to the desolate north. It was night, and for the first time, they stopped at night and didn't continue on their way. Instead, they started a fire to cook food. The delicious tentacle monster soup came again, with the essence of a 10,000-year-old treasured pearl and a few drops of spiritual liquid added. It was a complete tonic. This time, the gluttons were not only Ling Han and Hun Yo. Helian Sun Shui was a heaven-tier elite and a body cultivator, so her appetite wasn't bad. The three of them fought over food, making Hun Yo grind her teeth. This silly big girl snatched her Ling Han, and also wanted to snatch her food. She was really too hateful. They decided to have a good rest tonight, washing away the exhaustion of these few days. Because they were worried about the sea race's pursuit, they naturally entered the Black Tower to rest, which was the safest place. After Ling Han coaxed his son and Hun Yo, the two big kids, to sleep, he himself wanted to sleep, but saw Helian Sun Shui walk over. "What, still not sleeping?" he asked. Helian Sun Shui didn't answer, and an ominous glint appeared in her eyes. She directly came over and pushed Ling Han onto the bed, and began to grope him. Hey, what are you doing?" Ling Han jumped in fright. "This was too dry, wasn't it? You fucked me, and don't want to admit it?" Helian Sun Shui said through gritted teeth. "I'm not that kind of person, but if there's something, we can talk it out." "What's the meaning of you taking off my clothes?" Ling Han said weakly. You went to my bed, causing me to think about you every few days. Don't you want to shoulder this responsibility?" Helian Sun Shui continued to strip off his clothes. "Let me calculate for you, how many times did you owe me this year?" Dragon's nature was lascivious. Ling Han shivered, and said, "You plan to make me return this night to you? Don't say you can't." Helian Sun Shui stared at Ling Han with a disdainful gaze. "I can't." Ling Han was annoyed. What men hated the most was the word, can't. He immediately flipped over and mounted the horse, and said, "Don't beg for mercy. Bring it on." Helian Sun Shui naturally wasn't afraid. "You've already given birth to a son, and I still can't subdue you." "I don't believe it." Ling Han snorted. "Don't waste your energy on talking. Then where are the flowers? Concentrate on what you're doing." Chapter 749. One night passed, and Ling Han felt a faint sadness. In the battle with Helian Sun Shui, he had the absolute upper hand in the first half, tormenting her to the point that she didn't want to, but women were really strange creatures, saying, "don't," and "don't," yet enjoying it very much. Then in the second half, it became he didn't want to, and in the end, the female dragon became the master, tormenting him instead. Why was it like this? The inexperienced Ling Han concluded that his current tier was inferior to her, whether in terms of origin power or brute force. Perhaps he would have to wait until he broke through to the heaven tier to be able to fight with her. At this time, he was still resting on the bed, while Helian Sun Shui was already combing herself in front of the mirror. Her smooth black hair was like a waterfall, contrasting with her silky smooth and ivory white skin, giving her a shocking allure. Not enough. Helian Sun Shui looked at Ling Han through the bronze mirror, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly, appearing to be in a rather pleasant mood. Ling Han sighed, and said, I'm thinking that in the future, I'll have to work harder to knead the two small mounds on your chest into mountain peaks. Otherwise, if you cover your face with your hair, who knows if it's your chest or your back, Ling Han. Hellion Sun Shui instantly flipped out. Do you want to die? She said word by word. It's a fact that my chest is small, Ling Han said in a small voice, but didn't provoke this woman again. After all, she was the mother of his child. The two left the house and saw that Hun Yo was taking care of the child, playing fly with Ling Jian Shui, throwing the little guy several hundred meters high and catching him when he was about to hit the ground. The little guy danced and cried out, appearing very excited, but it scared Hellion Sun Shui to death. If Hun Yo was careless, then her son would definitely fall to pieces. She hurriedly leaped over and held her son in her arms. Then, she said to Ling Han, quickly, talk to her nicely. This little girl was also a little child herself, so she didn't know what to do. She could get into trouble at any moment. Ling Han nodded, walked over, and said, you can only play fly here, you can't play outside, N. Hun Yo agreed crisply. Hellion Sun Shui fainted. This was advice? She didn't know that there was still small tower here, so how could it let something happen to Ling Han's son? Hun Yo held Ling Han's hand and walked to eat breakfast. The others also got up. After washing, they waited to eat. Actually, with their strength, whether they ate breakfast or not would not make any difference, but who asked the food inside the Black Tower to be too delicious? Furthermore, it was very nutritious, so they naturally could not miss it. Hun Yo knew, and said, Ling Han Shui, Ling Han, after Ling Han immed. Hun Yo waited impatiently like a monkey as she said, Ling Han, you fought with that big dumb girl yesterday. Nyo heard her wails and screams, and it was so satisfying. Nyo wanted to rush over to help you, but I couldn't get in. Zhu Xian'er's and Li Zixian's faces flushed. Although they were both unmarried girls, everyone was asleep at night, and you two, a man and a woman, fought. Just thinking about it, it was a restricted level. Zhu Xian'er and Li Zixian, on the other hand, blushed deeply. Although they were both young ladies who had yet to marry, it was already late at night, and everyone was asleep. You two, a man and a woman, fighting, just thinking about it, it was definitely that kind of forbidden. Hunyo gave an "oh," pointed at Hellion Sun Shui's chest, and said, Nyo must sleep early, don't become a flat-chested big girl. Hunyo gave an "oh," pointed at Hellion Sun Shui's chest, and said, Nyo must sleep early, don't become flat-chested like big silly girl. Hellion Sun Shui was driven mad. Today wasn't the first time she was criticized for being flat-chested. What's wrong with being flat-chested, is it bothering you? Ling Han laughed loudly, put Hunyo on his lap, and said, so, Hunyo has to eat more meat, eat more milk, and vegetables, eat more of everything. And, Nyo likes this. Hunyo beamed. Wasn't eating something she was born with? After breakfast, they exited the Black Tower and continued on their way. Zhu Xian'er was a little resentful all along. Ling Han clearly said that he wouldn't talk about love before reuniting with his old lover, but in the end, this guy directly had a son, making her very jealous. No matter what, it was she who got to know Ling Han first, so why was it Hellion Sun Shui who gave birth to a son? Taking advantage of when no one was paying attention, she approached Ling Han, and said, Xian'er also wants to give birth to your child. Ling Han's heart involuntarily swayed. Zhu Xian'er's beauty didn't lose to heavenly phoenix divine maidens, and they went through life and death together. The friendship between the two had already surpassed friendship, but because of the conflict in his heart, it was still a bit away from love. But this didn't stop Ling Han from admiring her beauty. This was a stunner that could topple cities, and anyone who saw her would find it pleasing to the eye. Hearing such a beauty say that she wanted to give birth to his child, Ling Han was naturally a bit thirsty. He patted Zhu Xian'er's fragrant shoulder, and said, thank you, but the matter between me and Hai Nyo is a bit muddled. Then last night was also muddled. Zhu Xian'er's beautiful eyes turned, extremely flirtatious. Now that General Ling Han was here, he couldn't say that he couldn't resist the female Tyrannosaurus's power and was forced on. Who would believe that? In the Black Tower, he was a godlike existence, so how could he not keep his chastity? Ling Han could only laugh dryly. Fortunately, Zhu Xian'er's EQ was extremely high, after all, and wouldn't put Ling Han on the spot. She was forcing him like this only to tell Ling Han not to forget that there was still an infatuated person waiting for him. 7 days later, they passed through the Fallen Moon Gorge and returned to the desolate north. First, of course, was to see his parents. The group arrived at the Ling family. The servants still recognized Ling Han, and immediately ran to report. Young master is back. This was like a gust of wind that swept through the entire Ling family. Ling Dongxing and Yu Hongchang hurriedly ran out. Their son had gone out for another year, making them look forward to the stars and the moon, and they were truly extremely worried. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan followed behind father and mother Ling, their expressions full of affection, lovely and moving, making Ling Han sigh inwardly. He seemed to have incurred a bit too many emotional debts. Zhu Xian'er and Helian Sun Shui were obviously old faces. Yu Hongchang looked at Li Zixian, thinking, could this be a new daughter-in-law candidate? This child. Everyone looked at Ling Jianshui, who was held in Helian Sun Shui's arms. Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, Father, Mother, this is your grandson, called Ling Jianshui. The two old people were instantly overjoyed. There were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants was the worst. Their son was always not by their side, but suddenly bringing a grandson back naturally made them overjoyed. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan looked at Ling Han with a sorrowful gaze. Like Zhu Xian'er, they could almost gather a table of mahjong. That night, the Ling family held a grand banquet to celebrate the addition of the 3rd generation to the Ling family, and the family was a bit more prosperous. After this night, Ling Han went to Rain Country. He wanted to take over the imperial power of Rain Country and start the road of hegemony. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 750. Before returning, Ling Han purposely went to see the Rain Emperor to tell him about this matter, and also obtained the Rain Emperor's approval. The Rain Emperor wrote a letter for him to deliver to Qi Changyu on his behalf so that the latter could cooperate with Ling Han. When it came to splitting open the skies, Ling Han wouldn't care about Qi Changyu's feelings. Whether he was willing or not, he had to abdicate. Ling Han set off alone, and the others began to pack up. They were going to move again. In the future, when Ling Han ascended to the throne, his family would naturally live in the imperial palace. The desolate north was pitifully small in Ling Han's eyes now. He turned into lightning, his speed astonishingly fast. In less than half a day, he arrived at Rain Country, and directly barged into the imperial palace. How dare you, daring to barge into the imperial palace, die. Ling Han didn't hide his tracks and walked casually, immediately attracting guards who all attacked him. Pa, but these people had just raised their weapons when they fell to the ground one by one, their faces pale and their bodies twitching. Ling Han only released a little bit of his aura, but he was now at the peak of the spiritual infant tier, so wasn't this bit of aura awesome enough? Feng Yan used a spiritual infant tier law decree and almost swept through the imperial city, what more when Ling Han came personally, who knew how many times stronger he was. As he walked, the crowd also fell to the ground, unable to resist Ling Han's aura at all. They could only prostrate themselves and tremble. Sir, this is the imperial palace of Rain Country. An old man appeared. He was at the spiritual pedestal tier, and actually resisted Ling Han's aura. Obviously, this was a king among martial artists, or else he would have surrendered without a fight. Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, I'm here to see Qi Changyu. How dare you? The spiritual pedestal tier cultivator was enraged, and pointed at him. You dare call His Majesty by name, disgraceful. Ling Han said, Are you stalling for time, waiting for that old Rain Emperor to appear? He sensed for a moment, and said, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. The old Rain Emperor should have gone mad. Not to mention coming out of seclusion to fight, I'm afraid he won't be able to last more than 3 days. Bullshit. The spiritual pedestal tier cultivator shouted. Don't even think about shaking the army's morale. The old emperor has the nation's fortune to protect him, and his divine arts are matchless. How could you deceive him with just a few words? Is that so? Ling Han smiled faintly. After sensing for a moment, his origin power condensed into a large hand and grabbed towards a certain direction. Peng, a heavy sound rang out, followed by a hubbub of voices. Not good, His Majesty has been captured. The formation couldn't even withstand a single blow. A large hand broke through the formation and grabbed His Majesty. Where's the old emperor? Invite the old emperor over. The imperial palace was in chaos. The soldiers, eunuchs, and palace maids were all screaming. Peng, the imperial palace above Ling Han's head shattered, and a large hand of lightning also retracted, holding a young man dressed in a dragon robe. Who else could it be but the former 7th imperial prince, Qi Changyu, and the current Rain Emperor? The spiritual pedestal tier cultivator was so shocked that he almost spouted bile. What kind of ability was this? He did not move, yet he managed to capture His Majesty, and even broke through a formation. That was a flower blossom tier great formation. Even if a flower blossom tier cultivator personally came, they would need to blast it for a while before they could break through it, and this amount of time would be enough for the old emperor to rush over to face the enemy. But now, it couldn't even withstand a single blow. Just how strong was this person? Ling, Grandmaster Ling. When Qi Changyu saw Ling Han's appearance, his heart instantly calmed down, and his panic disappeared. Ling Han put down Qi Changyu, smiled, and said, It's really not easy to see you now. Ha, Grandmaster Ling must be joking. Qi Changyu laughed loudly. After sitting on the throne for a few years, he naturally possessed the magnanimity of an emperor. At least this superficial act was done very well, appearing calm and unruffled. However, just by looking at his legs that were still trembling, one could tell that he had really been quite frightened just now. Let's not talk about this for now. The old Rain Emperor's situation is not good, Ling Han said. Qi Changyu was shocked. He was also very uneasy, because a period of time had passed since he had been captured, but the old Rain Emperor had not reacted at all. This was definitely not right. Ling Han's figure floated, and Xiao, he had already disappeared. However, with a flash of lightning, he very quickly returned. In his hand was a withered old man who was almost turning into a tree trunk. Although the old man was very tall, his current weight did not exceed 25 kilograms at most. Old ancestor. Qi Changyu immediately took a step forward. Old Emperor. The spiritual pedestal tier cultivator also exclaimed. If he had not seen this many times, he really would not have believed that this was the old emperor. Fine, you've lucked out. Ling Han smiled and shook his head. He took out a ginseng that was as thick as a child's arm. The ginseng was covered in purple-veined patterns that were filled with the truth of the great Tao. This was the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. It just happened to be ripe, and he had harvested a large batch in one go. He had never thought that the first person to taste it would be the old Rain Emperor. The latter's lifespan had already dried up, and he had eaten too many spirit medicines that could prolong his life. Even if he was given a ton of 1,000-year ginseng, it would be of no help. So, if he wanted to continue living, then the only way was to increase his cultivation level and steal his lifespan from the heavens. With the supportive power of the nation, though the old Rain Emperor had the power of the flower blossom tier, he was not a true flower blossom tier cultivator, after all. His lifespan would at most increase by 100 to 150 years. If he really managed to break through to the flower blossom tier, then living for another 50 years would definitely not be a problem. A dragon blood tyrant ginseng was only used to exchange for 50 years of a flower blossom tier cultivator's lifespan. No matter who knew, they would denounce him as a spendthrift, right? But Ling Han didn't care. I have plenty of spirit medicines, so bite me if you dare. He immediately opened the furnace to concoct a pill. However, the dragon blood tyrant ginseng was a natural spirit medicine, and could be taken directly. However, the old Rain Emperor's cultivation level was too low, and if he took it directly, not to mention breaking through to the flower blossom tier, his body would definitely explode and he would die. So, Ling Han had to first process it and make the medicinal effects milder so that a low-level cultivator, like the old Rain Emperor, could take it. In less than half a day, Ling Han had finished concocting the medicinal pill. He pinched open the old Rain Emperor's mouth and forced the medicinal pill in. Then, he shot out a flash of origin power and sent the medicinal pill into the old Rain Emperor's stomach. The effect was almost immediate. This was the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. Though it wasn't the first generation, the ginseng king that bathed in the blood of a true dragon, but its descendant who knew how many years ago, it was still viewed as a treasure by heaven-tier cultivators that could help them break through to the shattering void tier. He was only breaking through to the flower blossom tier now, so wasn't it easy? The old Rain Emperor immediately opened his eyes. After taking a glance at Ling Han, he hurriedly charged into the skies. He was about to break through, and could possibly cause great destruction, so he naturally couldn't stay in the imperial palace any longer. He had advanced into the flower blossom tier with the help of power of the nation and bloomed a fake divine flower, so he was naturally very familiar with the flower blossom tier. Thus, his divine seed had long since been a seed, but it was unable to bloom into a real divine flower. Now, under the medicinal effects of the dragon blood tyrant ginseng, the divine seed instantly sprouted, and very quickly grew, blooming in full bloom. Flower blossom tier, ha ha ha. The old Rain Emperor laughed loudly. His body seemed to have been nourished, and actually became sturdy at a speed visible to the naked eye. His muscles bulged, and the withered hair on his head regained its luster. He landed, clasped his hands at Ling Han, and said, "Thank you, little friend, for your help." How could he not be happy? He was now a real flower blossom tier, and with the help of power of the nation, his maximum battle prowess could possibly reach the peak of the flower blossom tier. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "What I'm going to say next will probably make you stab me with a sword." Chapter 751. When Ling Han reported this to the academy, the various forces in the imperial capital had all received this news. What? This guy is actually leaving the academy at this time? In fact, he's even planning to leave the imperial capital. Is he seeking death? How could the Luo clan and Zhao clan let go of this kind of hatred? Once he leaves the imperial capital, he'll definitely die. Indeed. No matter how talented he is, he's only in the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. His battle prowess definitely can't surpass the consummate level. There are far too many people that can suppress him. Does he think that he can act without reservations just because he has the Ninth King's support? Though he's a genius, he's too stupid. Whether he's talented in cultivation has nothing to do with how he conducts himself. It's fine if we don't have this kind of genius. He'll only cause trouble. Moreover, he doesn't know when to stop. All of a sudden, the various great forces that had initially wanted to recruit Ling Han all chose to back off. At first, they had been watching from the sidelines. After all, Ling Han had offended Zhao Luan. If they recruited Ling Han, they would have to risk offending the Zhao clan. But now, Ling Han was actually acting so recklessly. This caused them to all shake their heads. If they recruited Ling Han, who knew? He might cause a great disaster before he could even grow up, and destroy their own clans. The Luo clan. This brat actually ran out of the imperial capital. Luo Hongdao was stunned for a moment. Even he couldn't believe such a stupid action. But then he laughed loudly, and said, then he's really seeking death. Go, arrange for someone to kill him. The members of the Dark Knight Hall are too unreliable. They haven't managed to kill a minor character in the Mountain River tier even after so long. Since he wants to run out of the Imperial capital, then make sure to deal with him cleanly. It has nothing to do with us anymore. Ha, it's 100,000 true origin stones, after all. Why give them away for nothing? Most importantly, retrieve the Crimson Ground locking net. The clan has paid too high a price for this, so we definitely can't let it fall into the hands of others. Zhao Luan sat boldly, listening to the reports of Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong. He smiled coldly, and said, Father has secretly obtained a batch of Mountain River stones for me, as well as some 9 Darkness Divine pills. I'm going into seclusion, and when I come out, I'll be at the peak stage of the consummate level. At that time, I'll break through to the Sun-Moon tier, and become the youngest elite of the Sun-Moon tier in the history of this empire. So, the mission of killing that ant will be left to you guys. Yes, young master. Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong simultaneously half-knelt on the ground, respectfully accepting their orders. Even though Zhao Luan had been greatly humiliated, they didn't dare to lose the slightest bit of respect. This was because they all knew that it wasn't that Zhao Luan was inferior to Ling Han. They naturally had a better impression of Zhao Luan. One was the son of a great general, while the other was an ant that had come from a small world. There was even the slightest bit of room for comparison. The 9th king was young, and this was the age when her temperament was fickle. She had a favorable impression of him now, but that didn't mean that she would always have such feelings in the future. And no matter what, Zhao Luan was still the only son of great General Zhao, right? They were all stunned. Zhao Luan was courageous after experiencing humiliation. If he could really break through to the Sun-Moon tier in a short period of time, he would definitely become the most dazzling star of the entire Chaotic Star's majestic empire. This step was far too difficult to take. In the entire Chaotic Star's majestic empire, at least 90% of the immortal level elites were at the Mountain River tier. However, less than 1 in 10,000 could ultimately break through to the Sun-Moon tier. Zhao Luan wasn't even 1,000 years old at this moment. Just thinking about it made their scalps go numb. Just how bright was his future? The two of them exclaimed in astonishment. Although their talent was slightly inferior to Zhao Luan's, they were still super geniuses that were at least 2 stars and close to 3 stars. However, the gap between their cultivation levels was obvious. They were already over 20,000 years old, yet they were still only at the high extreme. This was because the cultivation resources that they had obtained were far inferior to Zhao Luan's. This further magnified the advantage of Zhao Luan's talent. Although that ant is only at the medium extreme, he has grasped a spiritual secret technique. Take these 2 jade seals. They can block about 100 divine sense attacks. Zhao Luan tossed out 2 jade seals. Thank you, young master. Zhuo Xiao and Zhao Luan were overjoyed. Among god tools, divine sense treasures were the rarest. Moreover, there were even fewer offensive treasures. Most of them were defensive treasures. But even so, defensive divine sense treasures were still incredibly valuable. This was because only great elites of the heavenly body tier could create them. Zhao Luan pondered for a moment, but still felt that he wasn't confident enough. He retrieved a treasured sword, and handed it over, saying, I'll bestow this purple moonwool sword to you. There are 9 divine patterns inscribed by my father on it. After activating it, you can unleash the battle prowess of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. At first, Zhuo Xiao and Fan Yong were still slightly worried. After all, Ling Han possessed the Crimson Ground locking net, which could make one of them lose their battle prowess and instantly kill him. However, with this god tool, their confidence was greatly boosted. So what if it was the Crimson Ground locking net? They could directly shatter it. Understood, we definitely won't disappoint young master, they replied loudly. Shui Yenyu came to find him, and Ling Han left the imperial capital with her. After exiting the city gates, Ling Han gazed at the ancient city in the distance, a myriad of thoughts running through his mind. In this imperial capital, although he appeared normal, there was an indescribable pressure that constantly reminded him that he was a hostage. Now that he had finally left, he felt an indescribable sense of relief. Although he had left once before, that was different. At that time, he had Ding Li and to keep watch, and it was like a prisoner going out to take a breather. He had to and could only head to the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, and it was not up to him to decide whether to leave or stop. Wife, now that it's just the two of us, shouldn't you give me a hot kiss or something? Ling Han asked with a smile. Shui Yenyu rolled her eyes at him, and said, now that we've left the imperial capital, every step is dangerous. Can't you be a little more serious? All right, serious. Ling Han drew out the cloud-piercing shuttle, and said, wife, please. Shui Yenyu did not correct his way of addressing her. This guy's skin was even thicker than the city walls. Moreover, she was also enjoying it a little. They entered the cloud-piercing shuttle, and Ling Han activated the God tool. Instantly, this beautiful shuttle immediately shot through the air, its speed astonishingly fast. Only when it was only a small black dot in the sky did they hear the sound of a sonic boom travel over. It was extremely difficult to break through the speed of sound in the immortal realm. Even very few Sun-Moon tier elites could achieve this. When the shuttle pierced through the air, all the monsters following behind it snorted heavily. There's no rush. Their target is definitely the Star Sea. We'll snipe them when we get there. The shuttle shot through the air, its speed incredibly fast. Shui Yenyu's eyes did not shift, yet her beautiful face became redder and redder. Finally, she could not help but rebuke, if you dare to touch me again, I'll chop it up. Ling Han chuckled, but did not stop. Instead, he pulled Shui Yenyu's entire body into his embrace, and said, wife, I like how you are when you're tough on the outside but soft on the inside. You say no, but your body is very honest. Pervert, Shui Yenyu rebuked, her face red with embarrassment. You should learn some new words. You keep saying these two words over and over again. I'm already tired of hearing them. Wu, Shui Yenyu was just about to retort, yet Ling Han's red lips were sealed between hers. The words that had reached her mouth instantly turned into enchanting moans. Her slender arms involuntarily wrapped around Ling Han's neck, her eyes as misty as water. Chapter 752. The expedition to the North region was not only to expand the territory and strengthen the power of the nation, but also to completely end the grudge with the Winter Moon sect. Ling Dongxing already cultivated to the peak of the spiritual pedestal tier, but to cross over to the flower blossom tier, logically speaking, he might need a dozen or even 20 years to complete, but Ling Dongxing couldn't wait that long, and neither could Ling Han. If it was someone else, they could only stare. But Ling Han was the alchemy emperor, so what did it matter if his talent was a bit lacking? Give me medicine. The dragon blood tyrant ginseng was now more than 100 stalks, and aside from a few left for sowing, the rest could all be used as medicine. How terrifying was that? Ling Dongxing was forcibly promoted to the flower blossom tier, and added with the fact that Ling Han already established a nation and established a huge territory, he respected Ling Dongxing as the retired emperor and could naturally use the power of the nation. With the expansion of the Ling dynasty, the power of the nation would only become stronger and stronger. In this way, would Ling Dongxing still lose to Ao Feng? Before setting out on the expedition, Ling Han once again made a trip to the ancient mining area of Fire Country. There were countless powerful warriors buried here, and it was extremely possible that they had cultivated netherworld arts. In the future, they would be able to open up a passageway to the netherworld. To the vast lands, that would similarly be an incredibly terrible thing. Ling Han was now racing against time. Not only did he have to split open the sky before the 5 sects of the divine realm made their move, but he also had to be earlier than this group of living corpses. When he arrived, that giant silver spider actually appeared, waving its giant legs that were like divine spears, breathing towards the moon as if absorbing the essence of the moon. The higher the tier, the more one could sense the terror of this giant spider. A 15-eyed corpse king level kickass. This giant silver spider probably just happened to run out to cultivate and was bumped into by him. Otherwise, this giant spider wouldn't even bother to look at him, so how could it possibly come out specially for him? Ling Han estimated his own battle prowess. The higher the tier, the harder it was to battle surpassing one's own tier. This was also applicable to Ling Han. After advancing into the deity transformation tier, Ling Han's current battle prowess was comparable to 1 star of heaven tier. But when he advanced into the spiritual infant tier, he could rival 9 stars of the deity transformation tier. However, he was still the monarch of the Great Ling Empire. As long as it was within his territory, he could use the power of the nation to increase his battle prowess. This could increase his battle power by 1 star, and this was only after he unified the northern wilderness. If he could unify the north region as well, his battle prowess would increase by at least 5 stars. If all 4 regions were united, it would be even more impressive. It would be more than enough to reach 10 stars. The prerequisite was that Ling Han's body would be able to withstand such a terrifying power of the nation. Added with the power boost from the Black Tower, his battle prowess naturally soared to the Shattering Void tier, but the key was how many stars of Shattering Void tier he could reach. After all, the desolate north was too small. Although it could increase his battle prowess by 1 star on top of the Heaven tier's foundation, in the Shattering Void tier, it was practically negligible. There was no way he could defeat this big spider. Ling Han thought. He shook his head and gave up on the idea of going down to investigate. After all, it would be too wasteful to spend the Black Tower's power boost here. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he stopped in his tracks. Although the ancient mining area was filled with black chi all year round, it was eerie and terrifying. This time, it seemed to be a bit more serious. The black chi was even thicker, as if it had solidified. It was as black as ink, appearing even more terrifying. Were the people underground coming out? Ling Han listened attentively. There seemed to be people whispering around him, but he couldn't hear clearly what they were saying, as if they were the voices of ghosts. He left. This place was too strange and sinister. Without enough strength, it was better not to wander around here. The great army moved out of the fallen moon gorge and launched an all-out attack towards the north region. Ling Han revealed his identity as a heaven-grade alchemist. Along the way, the Alchemist Society was definitely the first to surrender. What a joke, a heaven-grade alchemist was a god in their hearts. Now that a god wanted them to follow, how could they refuse? And the Alchemist Society just so happened to have a transcendent status and great influence, causing many cities to directly surrender without fighting. What Ling Han wanted to do was not to conquer the world. Conquering the North region was really too easy. Randomly picking a few generals under his command would be invincible in this region. What was most important to a martial artist? Of course, it was strength. With enough strength, others naturally could only submit. Moreover, respecting a heaven-grade alchemist as master was not something unacceptable. Only 7 days later, they advanced to the front of the Winter Moon Sect's mountain gate. The last time he came here, he had to rely on the Black Tower's power boost to be able to battle a spiritual infant tier elite, but now his regular battle prowess had advanced into the heaven tier, almost comparable to his last life's, and with the Black Tower's power boost, he could even match a Shattering Void tier elite, and destroy this sect with a single finger. Your Majesty, should we attack immediately? A young man asked. He was Jin Wuji, who had known Ling Han since he was in De Yuan City. Back then, he had even been hostile with Ling Han because of his younger brother. At the time, he had not followed the others to the Winter Moon sect. Instead, he had married a beautiful wife in the imperial city and lived a happy life. But now that Ling Han had returned, he had also enlisted into the army to help Ling Han. He had just advanced into the spiritual ocean tier, so his strength was obviously not important to Ling Han, but Ling Han needed people he could trust, so Jin Wuji was naturally put in an important position. However, more old friends were now in the Winter Moon sect, and now the first to attack was the Winter Moon sect. Firstly, the distance was indeed close, and secondly, Ling Han wanted to recruit these old friends under his command. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Small Rock, you go take the lead." The rock spirit howled, and charged towards the Winter Moon sect. It had now advanced into the deity transformation tier, and added with the special characteristics of the spirits of the 5 elements, its battle prowess was comparable to the peak stage of the deity transformation tier. With a punch, it destroyed the Winter Moon sect's protective array. Ling Han invited Ling Dongxing, so the grudge between him and Ao Feng naturally had to be settled by his father personally. This was the hatred that Ling Dongxing had hidden for 20 years. With the rock spirit wreaking havoc like this, the Winter Moon sect almost immediately raised their hands and surrendered. Martial art pursued the principle of respect for the strong, and since the rock spirit was so awesome, the Winter Moon sect naturally lost their fighting spirit. The million-strong army shouted in unison that those who surrendered would not be killed, so everyone naturally handed over their weapons and obediently surrendered. Ao Feng was brought over. His spirit base was destroyed by Ling Han, and his cultivation level remained in the early stage of the flower blossom tier. When he saw Ling Han, he couldn't help but feel great hatred, and said angrily, "If it weren't for that bitch begging and me being soft-hearted and killing you, little bastard, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. How dare you?" Yuan Cheng he smashed a fist onto the back of Ao Feng's head, causing Ao Feng to immediately lie on the ground. Ling Han nodded towards Yu Kai Yu and the other members of the Yu family, which could be considered a greeting. Now, he didn't have the time to deal with these relatives. Ling Dongxing stood out, and said, "Ao Feng, fight me. If you can defeat me, I'll let you live." Ao Feng sneered. 20 years ago, you were defeated by me. It's the same now, and it will be the same in the future. Then let's fight. Ling Dongxing's fighting spirit was high, and he stepped down with his sword in hand. Chapter 753. Yuan Cheng he couldn't help but ask Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, motioning him to do as he was told. With his current strength, even if Ling Dongxing was truly defeated, he could still save his father in time. Yuan Cheng he loosened the restriction on Ao Feng, allowing a pair of people with grievances from 20 years ago to have their final battle here. Ling Dongxing unleashed the demon birth sword. That's right, Ling Han gifted this 10th tier spirit tool to his father. Although Ling Dongxing couldn't even activate a single vein, a 10th tier spirit tool was a 10th tier spirit tool after all, and its sharpness alone was nature-defying enough. Though Ling Dongxing had some talent in the field of martial arts, he could barely be classified as a talented person, and definitely could not be considered a genius. He had Ling Han's full guidance, but he had only managed to form one flash of sword chi. This was enough. A flash of sword chi could borrow the power of the demon birth sword, and the destructive power it unleashed was extremely terrifying. After all, the power of sword chi was influenced by both the martial artist and the treasured sword, so how could a 10th tier spirit tool not be powerful? Ling Dongxing and Ao Feng battled fiercely. The hatred buried for 20 years finally erupted completely. The two clashed, sword chi crisscrossing, and origin power colliding, both releasing their strongest power. Theoretically, Ao Feng was definitely stronger. He advanced into the flower blossom tier a few years earlier than Ling Dongxing, and his use of flower blossom tier power was far above Ling Dongxing's. Moreover, he formed as many as 9 flashes of sword chi, almost advancing to 10 flashes and having hope of condensing them into ray. In comparison, Ling Dongxing only grasped one flash of sword qi, but he possessed a 10th-tier spirit tool. The sword qi shot out through the demon birth sword was extremely sharp, crushing Ao Feng's sword qi. Upon contact, Ao Feng's sword qi was shattered, completely not qualified to be a match. Bang, bang, bang. The more Ling Dongxing fought, the more valiant he became. He had eaten an unknown amount of spirit medicines, but he was unable to unleash all of them. Many of the essences were accumulated in his body. Now that he was in such a battle, these essences immediately began to circulate, and were continuously absorbed by him. This meant that his strength could always be replenished. On the other hand, Ao Feng's spirit root had already been shattered, so he couldn't rely on his spirit root to absorb spirit qi and transform it into his own essence force. He could only rely on elixirs. However, there was a resistance to medicinal pills. Eating the first pill would bring out the full effect, but eating the second pill would only bring out 90% of the effect. After that, it would drop to 80%, 70%, 60%, and so on. In this way, the more he fought, the weaker he became. How could he match up to Ling Dongxing? After fighting for 2 hours, Ao Feng showed signs of being unable to hold on. But he also knew that neither Ling Dongxing nor Ling Han would let him go, so he gritted his teeth and struggled bitterly, not begging for mercy. His every move was swift and fierce, risking his life to take Ling Dongxing down with him so that he could take him down with him. Unfortunately, if it were 5 years ago, Ling Dongxing naturally wouldn't hesitate to take him down with him. But now, he had a wife, a son, and a grandson, so how could he be willing to die with such a great enemy? He only strengthened his defense, and when Ao Feng's strength was exhausted, he would obviously still die. On the road to hell, I'll be waiting for you guys. Ao Feng finally reached the end of his road, and said in a stern voice and expression, his eyes vicious as if he wanted to devour someone. Pooh! His chest was pierced by Ling Dongxing's sword, and the demon birth sword pierced through his heart, immediately extinguishing his life force. Directly hit by a 10th-tier spirit tool, even a heaven-tier warrior couldn't possibly survive, let alone a mere flower blossom-tier warrior. Ling Dongxing couldn't help but feel extremely rueful. He originally thought that he would never be able to take revenge in this lifetime, because he knew that Ao Feng's martial art talent was indeed above his. Moreover, Ao Feng had the support of a colossus like the Winter Moon sect, so the gap between them would only grow larger. But who asked him to give birth to a good son? Ling Han didn't start a massacre, and Ao Feng's children were all pardoned by him. He wasn't a bloodthirsty person, and in reality, as long as it didn't cross his bottom line, he was always a very easygoing person. At the same time, he was also a lazy person. When he discovered that Hellion Sun Shui had extraordinary leadership skills, he let her manage the country's affairs. She was a royal family of the North Sea, after all, and with how vast the North Sea was, she had the confidence to manage even the vast North Sea, not to mention such a small foundation now. Hellion Sun Shui gladly accepted. With her, the throne would naturally be her son's, so what was wrong with an old mother helping out for her son? However, when facing outsiders, she would change her appearance with an appearance-changing pill to avoid being discovered by the Sea race. As for external campaigns, with Yuan Chenghe and Li Fengyu as generals, and the Rock Spirit assisting, there was at least no place in the North region that couldn't be taken care of, so he was naturally at ease. Internal affairs and external affairs were all taken care of, so what need was there for him to worry? If he had to do everything himself, then what was the point of having so many underlings? He happily became a hands-off shopkeeper, only asking for one thing, to appease the people's hearts, and put stability first. Because the purpose of a campaign wasn't for territory, but for the power of the nation. If the people's hearts could be won over, then the nation's fortunes could be expected. Under Ling Han's will, Great Ling Nation recruited soldiers widely, offering extremely tempting conditions. On the other hand, it was to improve the people's livelihood, giving every citizen the chance to cultivate, at least reaching the fourth or fifth layer of body refining tier to strengthen their bodies and raise the level of the entire nation. Under Zhu Xian'er's strong suggestion, Ling Han decided to go to the Half-Moon sect. If he could convince the Half-Moon sect to surrender, then not only could he avoid a massacre, but it could also make Zhu Xian'er feel better, because this was her sect, after all. Ling Han and Zhu Xian'er were obviously indispensable, while Hellion Sun Shui stayed behind to deal with national affairs. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan also continued to accompany father and mother Ling. Only Hunyo, Rabbit, and Gold-Seeking Rat followed. Ling Jianshui hadn't weaned yet, so he could only follow Hellion Sun Shui. However, in case his son's milk supply was insufficient, Ling Han also went to hunt a few white jade cows that were breastfeeding. The milk produced by this kind of beast was the most nutritious. This obviously made Hellion Sun Shui very dissatisfied. She was just a bit small, but her milk supply was ample, okay? Ling Han and the others set off, heading towards the Half-Moon sect. After 7 days, they arrived at the place, and with Zhu Xian'er reporting on their behalf, they were quickly summoned. Next, Ling Han revealed his strength, which obviously intimidated the Half-Moon sect. In addition, Zhu Xian'er would be Ling Han's future beloved concubine, and after the Half-Moon sect submitted, their status wouldn't drop, which naturally made the elders of the sect make a clear choice. Resistance would mean certain death, so was there a need to consider what choice to make? This could be considered a happy ending for everyone. Ling Han didn't immediately return to the court, but instead headed towards the enclosed agriculture mountain. That was the place where Zhu Xian'er's master suffered a Dao injury. At that time, Ling Han was very interested, but at that time, his strength wasn't enough, so he put it aside. Now that his battle prowess could rival a heaven-tier elite, he was naturally full of confidence. After another 7 days, they arrived at the place. This was already the extreme west of the north region, and a little further was the region wall that separated the north and west regions. Enclosed agriculture mountain, Agarwood Valley, this was a forbidden place. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 754. There were a few dangerous places in the north region, known as forbidden zones for life. They were extremely dangerous, and even the strongest cultivators in the spiritual infant tier could die if they entered. For example, the Dark Demon Forest, where demonic chi boiled in the core, and anyone could be affected and become a mindless walking corpse. Agarwood Valley was also a forbidden zone for life, but it wasn't as famous as the Dark Demon Forest because there were rocks everywhere in the valley, and no one had ever heard of spirit medicine being produced, so it naturally lost its attraction. Martial artists were willing to take risks because there was profit to be gained. Throwing away one's life without benefit was not something only a fool would do. Ling Han and the others stopped outside this valley. From the outside, they could faintly see the rocks in the valley piercing through the air, as if they were full of sharp thorns, and the dense purple fog continuously rose, transforming into different shapes, which had the effect of blocking their vision. Even if Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, he couldn't see too deep into the valley. The Dark Demon Forest has Chaos Source Rock, then what is here? Ling Han mumbled, and asked Zhu Xian'er, why did your master come here? Zhu Xian'er thought, and said, Master loves to travel the world and explore all kinds of dangerous places. He said that the formation of every dangerous place is not simple, and may contain rare treasures. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Didn't think your master was a miser. Zhu Xian'er rolled her eyes at him in annoyance, but it was extremely flirtatious, making Ling Han's heart beat rapidly. She said, Master said that the mist here can transform into all kinds of shapes, and some even conform to some natural laws. There might be some shocking secret treasure buried in the valley. Ling Han shook his head, and said, then your master went deep inside, and suffered a disaster. That's about it. Zhu Xian'er sighed softly. In order to heal her master's Dao injury, she had really been so busy in the past few years that she was exhausted both mentally and physically. Because she no longer had her master's protection, many people in the sect revealed thoughts of forcefully occupying her, causing her to almost break down in response. Then I really have to take a look. Ling Han grabbed the gold-seeking rat and said, "Fatty, go ahead and see if there's anything valuable." The gold-seeking rat quickly scurried back to his shoulder and squeaked, meaning that this place was extremely dangerous. It was scared to death, so why would it want to go? Ling Han shook his head and said, "Sai, you fight to be the first to eat, but when I want you to do something, you come up with all sorts of excuses. I've raised you for nothing." The gold-seeking rat rolled its eyes. Bao Bao was a gold-seeking rat, not a treasure-seeking rat, and definitely not a battle rat. It wouldn't go to such a dangerous place. Then we can only go. Ling Han drew Zhu Xian Air into the Black Tower. Previously, her master had also been in the spiritual infant tier, yet had suffered a Dao injury. She obviously could not bear it either. Ling Han, Hun Yo, and Rabbit walked towards the valley together. They did not dare to be careless, and were prepared to hide in the Black Tower at any time. There's a kind of charm here that makes Uncle Rabbit feel as if it's about to float and ascend. Rabbit suddenly said. Ling Han sensed it. Although this purple fog did not contain spiritual qi, there really seemed to be something that the outside world did not have. He couldn't say what it was, and only felt that this thing seemed to be of an extremely high level. Like 10th tier rare metal crushing 1st tier materials, it naturally had an advantage. No wonder Xian Air's master would come here. Ling Han nodded. There was no cultivation technique above the 7th layer in the north region, so if Zhu Xian Air's master wanted to break through to the deity transformation tier, he could only think of other ways. The purple fog affected vision and blocked divine sense, causing the three's vision to only be able to see about 6 meters away, and divine sense to only be able to be released about 6 meters away. If they encountered any sneak attack at this time, they would definitely be caught off guard. Hong. Just speaking of sneak attack, they really encountered a sneak attack. A cloud of purple fog turned into a leopard, pouncing towards them with astonishing speed, definitely not inferior to heaven tier. Ling Han snorted, formed a seal with both hands, and struck towards that purple leopard. Earth-overturning seal. Both of his hands were covered in vein-like patterns, emitting a golden light like the light of the world, actually dispersing some of the purple fog. Although he'd already restored the earth-overturning seal to be able to be used with one hand, he hadn't drawn his sword yet, so naturally, the power of using both hands was slightly stronger. The purple leopard was unafraid, opening its large mouth and biting towards him. It was clearly formed from fog, yet it seemed as if its eerie white teeth and blood-red tongue could be seen, appearing extremely sinister. Peng! The earth-overturning seal hit the purple leopard, and golden light radiated in all directions, instantly blasting it apart, turning back into purple fog and disappearing into the valley. Although the opponent was unable to withstand a single blow, Ling Han's expression was somewhat solemn, and he said, "It has the strength of a first star of the deity transformation tier, and seems to be able to use a sliver of the power of regulation." He raised his hand, and there was actually a wound on his palm, though the wound was very shallow. A mere first star of the deity transformation tier's battle prowess could actually tear through his physical defense, even if it was only a little bit. This was shocking enough. His current physique was comparable to level 9 rare metal, and even a normal heaven tier elite would find it extremely difficult to injure him if they attacked him wildly. Unless a few heaven tier elites joined hands and refined him like level 9 rare metal, then it would be possible to refine him. But now, he was actually injured by a beast formed from fog. It was really hard to believe. No wonder Xian Air's master would suffer a Dao wound. This place really isn't simple, not inferior to the Dark Devil Forest, Ling Han said solemnly. Then let's retreat. There's meat to eat and carrots to chew outside. Why must we come here to seek trouble? Although Rabbit was also curious, it was obviously more afraid of death. Ling Han laughed, and said, "Not yet. I have the instant teleportation talisman, and even if I'm really trapped, it's not impossible to escape. Our goal is great, and these mystery realms and danger zones could bring unpredictable effects, so we must eliminate them, or at least know what the risks are." Like the ancient mining area of Fire Country, there were no less than 100 shattering void-tier living corpses inside, and once they ran out, it would greatly affect splitting open the skies. Since the Purple Moon Empire could snatch the time fluid to pass hundreds of thousands of years, and the living corpses in the ancient mining area even died from birth, digging their own graves and turning into nether bodies, then would there be more similar examples in this world? They continued to move forward. The purple mist rose up and turned into the form of demonic beasts several times to attack them. Moreover, it was a sneak attack every time. In this space where the vision was blocked and the divine sense was blocked, it was really a headache. Fortunately, these beasts formed from the purple fog only had the strength of the deity transformation tier, and were easily disposed of by Ling Han, but still left many wounds on Ling Han's hand. There was a sliver of power of regulation, and even the body of Diamond would find it hard to heal. They had to enter the Black Tower and borrow the power of the Black Tower to first expel those strange powers. Not long after, a river appeared in front of them, but what surged in the river wasn't water, but lightning. A blazing white river of lightning. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 755. This was a vast and boundless world. There were large fields of medicine, green mountains, and clear waters, spiritual beasts and celestial cranes, and celestial mist lingering around. It was as if it were a paradise on earth. Shui Yanyu received a huge shock. She had never seen a spatial god tool before. Could it be that they were all this big? This was already not something that could be described with the word spatial, but rather a whole world. Ling Han smiled faintly, and asked, "Are you satisfied with this place?" Shui Yanyu nodded repeatedly, her pretty face filled with pleasant surprise. However, she was immediately startled, and asked, "Then if we all enter this place, will the spatial god tool be discovered by others?" "No." Ling Han shook his head with a smile, and said, "I call this the Black Tower because its outer appearance is a black tower with 9 levels. However, only I can reach it, because it is too small, like a mustard seed. Thus, even if I also enter, no one could possibly discover this thing that is even smaller than a speck of dust." Shui Yanyu believed him, because she had seen Ling Han suddenly disappear before. No matter how she searched, she could not find him. Then with this treasure, wouldn't we be in an invincible position? She asked in pleasant surprise. "Wife, you are right." Ling Han hugged her without reservation. Just now, he really had not kissed her to his heart's content. "Damn pervert." Shui Yanyu murmured softly, but did not struggle too strongly. Seeing such a precious treasure, her heart was also surging, and there was a kind of passion rippling in her. The two of them were entangled, and only stopped when they were about to go off the rails. "I'll take you to see something good." Ling Han led Shui Yanyu to the place where he had planted the reincarnation tree. Shui Yanyu's eyes widened, and she asked, "Is it this empty space?" No. "It won't be long before a reincarnation tree will grow here," Ling Han said smugly. Shui Yanyu faltered, and said, "It's the reincarnation seed that you won at the auction. But don't you know that it needs 12 trillion years to truly grow?" "Hee, don't worry. I definitely won't wait until your teeth have all fallen out." Ling Han laughed loudly, and pinched her pretty face. "At most, it will take 3 years, and this reincarnation tree will be able to display its extraordinary effects. At that time, you can cultivate here for a day, and it will be equivalent to cultivating for a lifetime." Shui Yanyu was a little skeptical. After all, Ling Han had said that it needed 12 trillion years to grow. But the problem was, did he have a spatial god tool? Since he even had a god tool like this, it was not impossible that he would also have some unimaginable abilities. She chose to believe Ling Han. As expected, you are a person with great fortune, Shui Yanyu said with a nod. Being able to open the sky and come here, how could he be an ordinary person? Ling Han chuckled, and said, of course. Otherwise, how could there be a beautiful seductress like you throwing herself into my arms? Who threw herself into my arms? Shui Yanyu was still a little shy, and she was not used to being teased by Ling Han. Her pretty face was red, and her almond-shaped eyes were like water, so gentle and seductive that it could melt anyone's heart. You damn pervert. She recalled the past when Ling Han had peeped on her while she was bathing, and couldn't help but scold. She raised her fist and threw a punch at Ling Han. How could this little bit of power be taken seriously by Ling Han? With a pounce, he pounced on this seductive seductress. The two of them rolled around on the grass, and very soon, they were kissing again. The night passed, and early the next morning, Ling Han and Shui Yanyu went downstairs to eat breakfast. Though she had not really done it with Ling Han last night, the two of them had slept in each other's arms, so intimate that they were no different from husband and wife. This caused her pretty face to blush the whole time, as if it had been dyed red, and she was astonishingly beautiful. Thus, when she walked downstairs like this, she instantly attracted countless gazes. Quite a few people even spat, secretly thinking that Ling Han had really cultivated a lot of good fortune in his last life to actually be able to spend the night with such an alluring seductress. However, if it had been them, why would they still come out when they had such a beautiful seductress? It would be enough for them to just shut their doors and have fun every day. Because Ling Han had established his might yesterday, no one dared to say anything frivolous now. However, there were still quite a few people who used their eyes to take advantage of Shui Yanyu, fiercely glaring at her pretty face, chest, buttocks, and long legs. It was as if they wanted nothing more than to grow hands out of their eyes. After cultivating to the immortal level, one's body would completely break away from that of a mortal, and would no longer need to eat or drink. As long as there was spiritual chi that could be absorbed, then one would not starve to death or die of thirst, and would be able to live normally until their lifespan dried up. However, cultivators definitely did not cultivate for the sake of enduring hardship. Just like how sleeping was not necessary, everyone still habitually slept because it was beneficial to their body. Meanwhile, eating and drinking was to satisfy one's appetite, and this was a kind of enjoyment. Ling Han and Shui Yanyu each ordered a set of breakfast. It was very simple, and there were only a few steamed buns and a plate of side dishes. Thankfully, this was provided for free. Otherwise, if they had to charge a few true origin stones, then everyone would be hopping mad. Not good, many people from the Black 5 gang are charging over, a shop assistant suddenly said with a terrified expression as he suddenly rushed over. The 5 great forces often fought, and there would be some casualties every time. Perhaps it would happen to them this time. What? Many shop assistants immediately drew their weapons, and rushed out of the shop. In order to fight for territory, the smell of gunpowder had been especially strong recently, and fierce battles would break out every few days. Thus, the Great Chariot Gang was also long since prepared, and immediately entered into battle mode. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he and Shui Yanyu also walked to the entrance, and joined in the fun. There were over a dozen people on the street, and they were all dressed in black, all of them exuding a ferocious aura. However, they should all be in the Mountain River tier, and none of them had reached the Sun Moon tier. This was natural. The Sun Moon tier, even if they were in the low extreme, could be called an elite in the imperial capital, and could enter the Scarlet Heaven Academy to take up the position of an elder. In any clan, they would be a cornerstone. Tyrant Axe Pier was only a small place, after all, so how could they possibly send out Sun Moon tier elites for a random fight? If they really did send out such elites, it meant that they were serious, and wanted to fight to the death. Obviously, the 5 great forces would definitely not reach this step. Otherwise, if they fought to the death, or if they won a Pyrrhic victory, they would only be benefiting others. The remaining 3 gangs would definitely join forces to suppress them, and divide the profits among themselves. The members of the Black 5 gang stopped at the entrance of the inn, because the members of the Great Chariot gang had already gone out to greet them, not allowing them to take another step in. What are the bastards of the Black 5 gang doing here? Get the hell back. Get lost, or I'll beat you up. The members of the Great Chariot gang took the initiative to provoke them, because the other party was bullying into their territory. Among the members of the Black 5 gang, the crowd parted, and a young man walked out. He was not dressed in black, but rather in a flamboyant embroidered robe, which was as colorful as a butterfly. His looks were not bad, though. His skin was soft and tender, his lips red, and his teeth white. He was even holding a folding fan in his hand. Pa, this young man opened the folding fan, waved it lightly, and said, "Yesterday, someone beat up a disciple of my Black 5 gang. Today, I have specially come to find this person. Those who are not related, get the hell out of my way." Chapter 756. It wasn't easy to cultivate the thunderclap 9th heaven. Thinking back, Ling Han was struck by lightning for several days in order to attain minor accomplishment in the body of lightning. To improve the body of lightning, one had to continue being struck by lightning, absorbing the essence from the lightning, and gradually improving. This was extremely slow. From Ling Han's cultivation to minor accomplishment until now, the steps he took were pitifully small. It couldn't be helped. Although lightning strikes were extremely terrifying, for the body of lightning, the lightning essence contained in it was extremely little. To be able to attain major accomplishment in 50 years, Ling Han already considered it extremely fast. It was indeed fast. Major accomplishment of the body of lightning corresponded to the Shattering Void Tier, and how many Shattering Void Tier warriors could cultivate it in 50 years? In the past, that was simply unrealistic, and even the deity transformation tier warriors might not be able to reach it. Only now, with the flourishing age of martial art, speeding up the formation of elites, reaching the Shattering Void Tier in 50 years was truly possible. However, the benefits brought to Ling Han by a flower of lightning surpassed the sum of the lightning strikes he received previously. How shocking was this? "Hun Yo, you're definitely my lucky general," Ling Han said spontaneously. Hun Yo was happy, and said proudly, "Nyo is Ling Han's lucky general." The two continued forward, but to Ling Han's disappointment, they didn't encounter another flower of lightning for a long time. After walking for nearly 30 minutes, they finally arrived at the second flower of lightning. Hun Yo moved again, plucking the strange flower. Ling Han wasn't in a hurry to refine it, but stored it in the Black Tower. Now, he was more interested in the valley itself. What gave birth to this river of lightning? After walking for a while, rumbling could be heard, but it wasn't from the river of lightning. Ling Han was shocked. He turned to the other side and saw that another river shockingly appeared, but what surged in this river wasn't real water, nor was it lightning, but flames. It was hard to imagine that the flames surged like a river, and even made loud noises as they slapped. If this was magma, it would be easy to understand, but it wasn't. It was pure flames, and there were patterns flickering in the flames. Astonishingly, Ling Han also discovered vein-like patterns of the thunder element. Previously, there were flame patterns in the river of lightning. Could it be that Ling Han had a conjecture? The thunder river and the fire river had intersected before, which was why they affected each other. Continuing forward, it didn't take long for the two rivers to converge. However, to Ling Han's surprise, the two rivers didn't cross each other, but merged together. There was only one river left. Lightning and fire flowed in the river at the same time, but they were clearly separated. The well water did not interfere with the river water. One white and one red, it was extremely dazzling. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder the two rivers affected each other. It turned out that they came from the same source. Although they eventually separated, it was inevitable that they would still affect each other. He was even more curious about what was at the end of the river and why it could produce such a wonderful scene. However, it became more and more difficult to follow the river. Due to the intertwining of the lightning and flames, the resulting power was even more terrifying. Even though they weren't actively attacking, the lightning constantly shattered the nearby space, while the flames turned the valley into a true furnace that could burn everything. Nyo doesn't like this place. Even Hunyo began to complain. She didn't fear the lightning, but obviously wasn't immune to the flames. Beads of sweat appeared on her face. Ling Han was speechless. Only beads of sweat appeared, but he was already sweating like a stream. Keep going, and if we really can't stand it, we'll retreat, Ling Han said. Although he was very curious about this place, he wouldn't risk losing his life here. After all, his cultivation was still low, and he could wait until he reached the heaven tier or the shattering void tier before coming back. However, just as they were about to give up, the river of lightning and fire reached its end. They came to the bottom of the valley, and in front of them was a mountain wall. The river of lightning and fire surged out from below the mountain wall. There was a cave in the mountain wall. It was pitch black, and no one knew where it led to. At this point, whether it was the power of lightning or flames, they all dropped to the lowest point. Although it was still very fierce, it was at least within the range of what they could bear. Ling Han looked at the cave, and hesitated slightly. The cave could hide the secret of this valley, but it could also contain endless danger. Should he continue forward? He only hesitated slightly, and decided to move forward bravely. He still had an instant teleportation talisman, the Black Tower, and even the power boost could temporarily possess the battle prowess of the shattering void tier. What existence in this vast lands could instantly kill him? Go! He held Hunyo's hand and walked into the cave. If the situation turned bad, he would immediately put Hunyo into the Black Tower. The cave was very dark, really dark, so dark that even when Ling Han opened the Eye of Truth, he couldn't see anything. He raised his right hand, transforming origin power into flames, but he clearly felt the rising flames, but didn't see the slightest bit of fire. It was as if he was blind. However, if he turned around and looked outside the cave, he could clearly feel the surging river of lightning and fire. Ling Han couldn't help but be shocked. What was going on with this cave? Previously, in the purple fog, only his vision and divine sense were affected, but at least they could still be used. But now, it was as if he was truly blind. Not only could his eyes not see, even his divine sense couldn't sense anything. If it weren't for him holding Hunyo's hand, he definitely wouldn't have sensed that there was another person beside him. Right, he also lost his hearing. Strange, too strange. A great sense of alarm rose in his heart, but Ling Han still took another step and continued forward. The more it was so, the more curious he became, wanting to know the reason. Small tower, do you know what this place is? He used his divine sense to communicate with the Black Tower. There's a sliver of source power. Small tower revealed a hint of caution. If you find it for me to swallow, I can repair 100 million more. Fuck. Ling Han wanted to curse. This place was so terrifying, the river of lightning and fire surged, emitting the brilliance of the shattering void tier. Just thinking about it, he knew that the source was incredible. But it could only repair 100 million of the Black Tower, so if he had the chance to live, would he be able to see the Black Tower reappear with divine light? Be careful, Small Tower warned. If there's life here, killing you would be too easy. Nonsense. Ling Han didn't bother to pay attention to it, and simply continued forward. This was pure darkness. He couldn't see, hear, or smell, and even touch was disappearing. He clearly held Hunyo's small hand, but found that the touch was getting weaker and weaker, as if he had become a walking corpse. He couldn't help but feel his scalp go numb. What kind of lousy place was this? It was too strange. After an unknown amount of time, Ling Han finally couldn't sense anything. He didn't even know if he was still walking in this cave. Losing his 5 senses, what difference was there between him and a walking corpse? He told himself that he was searching, but had no idea where he was going. Did he bump into a wall? Because he couldn't feel anything, he couldn't sense anything even if he kept banging into the mountain wall and wasting his energy. Forced to do so, he entered the Black Tower. Chapter 757. Ling Han didn't enter the Black Tower alone, Hunyo was with him. He breathed a sigh of relief. At least he didn't get separated from Hunyo, or else finding the little girl in such an environment would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. Now, his 5 senses returned to normal. This practically made him feel the joy of regaining a new life. Zhu Xian'er just happened to come over, and Ling Han rushed up, hugged her, and kissed her enchanting cherry lips fiercely. He smelled the faint scent of her body, felt the slight heat of Zhu Xian'er's delicate body from his palms, and the plump touch, all of which made him feel a sense of reality. Zhu Xian'er didn't think he'd be so passionate, and couldn't help but be startled, then blushed. There were others. However, her delicate body soon became soft and hot from Ling Han's kiss, and a soft moan came from her small mouth. She opened her arms and hugged Ling Han like a snake, kissing back fiercely. She was aroused. Ling Han reluctantly let go of the beauty in his arms, and awkwardly discovered that as they kissed, his right hand actually climbed to her chest. Truly, one didn't need to be afraid of not knowing the goods, only afraid of comparing the goods. This girl's size completely crushed Helian Sun Shui's, and it was somewhat difficult to grasp with one hand. It was very elastic, and if he could grasp it without any gap, it would probably be even more slippery. TSK, TSK, TSK. Wayaya, Nyo's angry, Nyo's angry. Hunyo was driven mad, and glared fiercely at Zhu Xian'er, looking like she wanted to slaughter her. Ling Han laughed loudly, walked over to pat Hunyo's head, and said, "Be good." Hunyo still pouted, unable to withdraw her killing intent. Ling Han summoned a pig trotter and handed it over. The little girl didn't take it in a fit of pique, but she couldn't resist her gluttonous nature, and soon took it and gnawed on it, her small face immediately blossoming like a flower. As long as he coaxed her with food, he'd succeed. Big Brother Han. Zhu Xian'er was like spring water, tender and alluring. She just returned to her senses from that long kiss, her almond-shaped eyes blurred, so charming that water could drip out. "Adulterer, adulterer," muttered the rabbit. Ling Han recounted his encounter in the cave. Zhu Xian'er only felt terrified, but the rabbit said, sealing off the 5 senses, "This is definitely a great elite. If you were to face such an existence, you wouldn't even know how you died. Indeed, if you lost your 5 senses, how would you know where the attack was coming from and where your own attack should be directed?" "But Nyo can see," Hunyo said as she gnawed on the pork trotter. Her mouth was covered in oil as she waved her little hands around, slapping all over Ling Han's body. "You can see them?" Ling Han was surprised. Hunyo nodded heavily. Though this was very inconceivable, Hunyo was too freakish, so why couldn't she do it? "Then, Nyo will lead the way later." Ling Han patted the little girl's head. "Okay," Hunyo said as she waved her trotter. The two exited the Black Tower. Hunyo held Ling Han's hand and walked, while Ling Han completely relaxed. Though he couldn't feel Hunyo's hand anymore, he believed in Hunyo and let her lead. In reality, he couldn't feel himself moving at all. Time and space had lost all meaning, and after an unknown amount of time, he suddenly discovered that a weak light appeared in front of him. He was stunned for a moment, then realized, "I can feel it." With his 5 senses restored, Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. Ahead wasn't the entrance. Hunyo didn't lead him on a random walk, but a stone house with a milky white light. It was very weak, but very gentle. Ling Han walked in and looked around. This stone house was very simple. Strictly speaking, it was just a cave. Why was it called a stone house? That was because there was actually a stone statue erected in the center. This definitely wasn't formed naturally. The figure was extremely realistic, and every detail was clear. It was the appearance of an old man. Even if it was a stone statue, one could still feel his sage-like charm. So simple. Ling Han couldn't help but look disappointed. The source of two strange rivers, the cave that could make people lose their five senses, was actually such a simple stone house at the end. Even this stone house was naturally formed, without a trace of human effort, except for this stone statue. Strange, very strange. Who would put a stone statue in such a place? What, disappointed to see this lord? A voice suddenly sounded in Ling Han's mind. Ling Han was suddenly shocked. All his hair stood on end, and his scalp went numb. What the hell was this? He clearly didn't see anyone. Hey, Junior, where are you? The voice sounded again. Show yourself. Ling Han said sternly. He grabbed Hunyo with his right hand, ready to retreat into the Black Tower at any time. Isn't this lord right in front of you? TSK. A living person has a pair of eyes for nothing. Should this lord pluck them off? The voice said. In front of him Ling Han couldn't help but point at the stone statue. This is you. This lord doesn't like being pointed at. Believe it or not, this lord will break your claws. The voice said again. Ling Han withdrew his hand in shock. He'd seen many strange things, and it wasn't strange for stones to have life, like rock spirits. But the one in front of him clearly didn't have the slightest bit of vitality. This definitely wasn't a rock spirit. Ling Han could conclude that this was an ordinary stone statue, but for some reason, it could actually emit divine sense. After knowing what was going on, Ling Han instead felt reassured, and said with a smile, Senior, why don't you come out and let me see? If this lord could come out, would I waste words with you? The voice said, seeming somewhat angry and helpless. Could it be that Senior has been trapped here? Ling Han's heart trembled. For example, the Azura Demon Emperor had been split into 9 parts, each of which had been suppressed in different parts of the vast lands. However, that didn't seem right. Although there was also fog here, it was purple fog, and the lightning and flames also didn't match the Azura Demon Emperor. Junior, since you can come here, we can be considered to be fated. How about this, you find a few treasures for this lord, and this lord will bestow you an exceptional mystical power, how about it? The voice tempted. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh, and said, Senior's skill in getting something with nothing is too profound. Just a few words and you want me to work hard for Senior? Damn brat, who knows how many people fight to lick the soles of this lord's shoes, and this lord doesn't even need to look at them. Now I'm even using an exceptional mystical power to exchange with you, and you're still not content? The voice snorted coldly. One of the stone statue's hands actually flashed with lightning. So terrifying. The power of this lightning had at least reached the high-level heaven tier, definitely surpassing Ling Han's current limit. Ling Han's heart thumped. He could conclude that there were 2 strange rivers outside, or at least that lightning river was inextricably related to this mysterious existence. Chapter 758. Ling Han's thoughts turned quickly, and he said, Dare I ask how I should address Senior? Lightning flashed on the stone statue, striking towards Ling Han. Junior, let me teach you a lesson first, to let you know that you should respect your seniors, the voice said. Ling Han raised his fist to meet it, activating the thunderclap 9th heaven, fighting lightning with lightning. The lightning overflowed, interweaving with dazzling light. Ling Han was sent flying, crashing heavily into the wall, and then bouncing back. It was very shocking. This was a heaven-tier attack, but the wall didn't leave a trace, which showed how sturdy it was. The voice sounded surprised. Junior, you're quite strange. You're obviously only in the deity transformation tier, but your battle prowess has reached the heaven tier, and your physique has also reached this level. TSK, this is very rare even here. Very rare. Ling Han's heart trembled. The meaning of rare was that there was someone who could also reach such heights. Who was this mysterious existence? At least the Earth Dragon sect specialized in physical arts, and Jia Ming was a genius that appeared once in 10,000 years, claiming to have the highest ancestral blood, but his physique was only comparable to rare metals of the same level, far from being comparable to Ling Han's. And this little girl. The voice paused slightly. She can actually bear the aftermath of the battle as if nothing happened, simply inconceivable. Strange, a tiny mayfly world could actually produce such a genius. Senior, what's a mayfly world? Ling Han asked. Of course it's your incomparably tiny world, the voice said. This lord is Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, remember this lord's name, that is the world's strongest. Ling Han sneered inwardly. You didn't escape here because you were crippled, or else you'd be suppressed, or else you'd still need me to find some treasure and brag about being the world's strongest. But his expression remained unchanged, and he said, so it's Senior Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, may I ask Senior, why is our place a mayfly world? There aren't even real stars, suns, and moons, so what is it if not a mayfly world? Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire sneered. Alright, less nonsense, quickly go find treasure for this lord. As for this girl, stay, this lord wants to take her as a disciple. Pei, Nyo doesn't want it. Hu Nyo made a face. I'm very powerful. No, I'm the most powerful. Take me as your master. You'll benefit greatly. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire sounded like he was trying to trick a child. Thunder, Fire. Ling Han understood in his heart that the River of Lightning and the River of Fire outside were both born because of the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire. From this point of view, the other party was indeed very strong, at least able to rival the Shattering Void tier. Moreover, from his tone, he was obviously not someone from the lower realm. No wonder the almighty beings of the God realm were so arrogant. Locked here by someone, and can only rely on a broken stone statue to speak, how powerful can he be? Hu Nyo said disdainfully. Arg! The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was infuriated. His furious divine will interweaved, unable to calm down for a long time. After a long while, he said, one day, I will recover my strength. At that time, I will kill all the experts in the 9 heavens and make them bow down to me. Ling Han interrupted, I wonder if Senior can tell us about the God Realm? God Realm. Ha 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 ha. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire laughed loudly, and sneered. Why should I tell you? Young man, hand over these treasures, and I'll tell you everything you want to know. A few questions and you want some treasures in exchange? Senior is too good at doing business, no deal. Ling Han refused at once, paused, and said, however, there's no harm in listening to what treasures Senior needs. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire was very displeased. A mere deity transformation tier junior dared to bargain with him, but who asked him to ask for help? He snorted, and said, I want these 4 things, True Dragon's Horn, Heavenly Phoenix's Feather, High Crimson Blood, and Purple Peak Divine Gold. Pay! The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. Why don't you just rob? Which one of these 4 things isn't the world's top divine item? Most importantly, would there be such divine items in the lower realm? For example, True Dragon's Horn. Although Hellion Sun Shui was a descendant of a true dragon, she only possessed a sliver of bloodline, and was who knew how far away from a true dragon. Even the ruler of the four seas, the imperial family's Ao family, only had slightly more concentrated dragon blood, and was still miles away from a true dragon. None of the other three things were inferior. Not to mention that Ling Han was only in the deity transformation tier, even a shattering void tier cultivator wouldn't be able to do anything about them. Firstly, they couldn't beat them, and secondly, they couldn't find them. Hee, I don't want you to find them immediately, you can't find them in this lousy place. However, when you go to the God realm in the future, you'll have the chance to obtain them. I'll wait for you, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said. Nonsense, it seems like you can't leave like this, can't you run out for a stroll? Ling Han laughed mischievously, and said, then I wonder what kind of exceptional mystical power Senior will bestow upon me. If this mystical power was really awesome, then after he obtained those divine objects in the future, he could consider whether or not to do this business. I'll send you a divine sense now, and let you see the power of the mystical power, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said. Shio, a small light dot flew out from the stone statue, and stopped in front of Ling Han. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless, and carefully observed for a while. When he confirmed that it was indeed a memory scene, he extended a finger and pressed it. Wang, a battle scene immediately appeared in his consciousness. A person with an unclear appearance was in a fierce battle. His opponent was a person who used a sword, and the sword light was piercingly cold and extremely terrifying. His appearance was unclear because there was a layer of fog on his face, but Ling Han had a feeling that this was the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and not the person who used the sword. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire suddenly showed his might, and 4 more arms actually grew out of his body, as if he had become an octopus. 6 arms simultaneously activated a secret art, and it was as if he had become 3 people. Ling Han was astonished. Although he had grasped many mystical powers and secret arts at the same time, at the very least, he couldn't use the annihilating dragon star arrow and earth overturning seal at the same time. However, if he could also have 4 more arms, then it would be completely different. With 6 arms spread out at the same time, he activated 5 secret arts at once, and instantly suppressed that swordsman. How is it? This is the immovable deity metal body great mystical power, and this is only the first tier. If you continue to cultivate it, your entire body can become bigger, and just the power of a swing will be able to destroy everything, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said in a tempting tone. This is an exceptional mystical power that I found in an ancient site after expending Herculean effort and almost dying. Do you want to learn it? If you do, then bring those 4 divine objects here, and this seat will teach you. Want to learn very much. Even if it was only the first tier, transforming into a body with 6 arms, it would still be extremely practical, and it would be able to release multiple mystical powers at the same time. This was too valuable. Ling Han nodded and said, all right, I will work hard to find these 4 divine objects. However, Senior, my current strength is too weak. Can you first teach me some mystical arts so that I can have a little more confidence? Otherwise, if I die, it will be a loss to Senior, right? It was rare to encounter such a powerful existence, and it would be a waste not to take advantage of the benefits. Chapter 759. You're really evil. In the Black Tower, Shui Yenyu shook her head and sighed. Luo Yu and Luo Wu were both the core forces of the Luo clan, and Zhou Xiao, Fan Yong, and Lu Ying were also people who had lived for tens of thousands of years. However, all of them had been toyed around in the palm of Ling Han's hand. He had said that he wanted to force the murderer to reveal himself so that he could catch them, but in truth, he only wanted these people to fight among themselves. Meanwhile, he was enjoying the show from the other side, enjoying it with great relish. Then do you like it? Ling Han asked with a smile. Unfortunately, under the isolation of the dense fog, he similarly couldn't obtain anything from the Black Tower. This made him feel greatly regretful. I don't like it, Shui Yenyu hurriedly said. She was afraid that Ling Han would make a move on her again. This made her feel both happy and disgusted. Ling Han snickered, and said, "Didn't they say that women love bad men?" Twisted theory. Shui Yenyu criticized. She definitely wouldn't like a bad man. Otherwise, how could she have fallen out with Xiao Luan? It's about time to go out, Ling Han said. He could already feel sunlight shining down on them again. Xiao, the two of them exited the Black Tower. With the isolation of the dense fog, it was really impossible for anyone to discover that they had disappeared for a period of time. Now, they had suddenly appeared again. The sun shone, and light returned. Everyone felt as if they had returned to the mortal world from a gloomy hell. The feeling of losing their eyesight and divine sense was really too terrible. Gasp! However, everyone was immediately stunned because there were 7 more corpses on the deck. They were lined up neatly, and they just happened to be the remaining members of the Black Five gang. The way each of them had died was exactly the same. They had all been stabbed in the chest, and it was a fatal blow. Who had done this? Everyone's eyes involuntarily turned to Ling Han. He was the one who had suggested to re-enter the dense fog, so he was naturally the most suspicious. Ling Han, what else do you have to say this time? Luo Yu immediately shouted. There's naturally nothing to say to a stupid bird like you, Ling Han said with a smile. My idea was not bad, right? The murderer has appeared again. However, everyone didn't work together. Otherwise, with so many elites at the consummate level of the mountain river tier standing guard, how could the murderer have calmly retreated after killing them? Luo Wu pointed at Ling Han, and said, "You're lying. It was clearly you who did this." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Everyone, let's be honest. Just then, everyone was attacking me, so how could I have had the time to assassinate others? Moreover, I've killed as many as 7 of them." "Don't slander me," Fan Yong said calmly. "That's right, don't spout nonsense." Luo Yu immediately denied it. Attacking a disciple of the Scarlet Heaven Academy? If news of this spread, it wouldn't be a good thing. Yang Tiecheng's thick brows furrowed into a Ji character. He was naturally aware that the situation had been so chaotic just then, and it was indeed because everyone had been attacking Ling Han. In such a chaotic situation, Ling Han still had the time to kill people. Moreover, he had killed as many as 7 people. He couldn't believe it. But on the other hand, Ling Han was indeed the most suspicious. He was the one who had suggested to re-enter the dense fog, and he had a grudge with the Black Five gang. All the evidence pointed to Ling Han. Why don't we return to the dense fog again? However, we have to tie this person up this time, Luo Yu said as she pointed at Ling Han. Good idea. Fan Yong immediately clapped his hands in approval. Hee, Ling Han, didn't you say that you are innocent? Then tie yourself up. If someone still dies after leaving the dense fog, that will prove that you are not the murderer, Luo Wu said. Ling Han scoffed, and said, "Are you all idiots? If the murderer doesn't move, then wouldn't I be tortured into a confession? Moreover, you all are all looking at me so unkindly, so how would I dare to tie myself up and become a living target for you all? Brother Yang, you are the owner of this ship, so what do you think we should do?" Luo Yu threw the question to Yang Taicheng. Yang Taicheng pondered for a long while before saying, "Ling Han, come over here. I will ensure your safety." What he meant by saying these words was that he agreed with Luo Yu and the others' suggestion. They would return to the dense fog after restraining Ling Han. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "All right, I trust Lord Yang." He nodded at Shui Yenyu, and the two of them walked to Yang Tiecheng's side. Yang Taicheng retrieved 2 sets of shackles, and said, "These were forged from level 4 godly metal, and there are also 3 divine patterns on them. If they are locked, even cultivators at the consummate level of the mountain river tier will not be able to break free." Everyone nodded. These shackles were specially used to restrain elites. They were only forged from level 4 godly metal, and there were also level 6, level 7, and level 8 shackles that could even restrain elites at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Those 3 divine patterns would restrict the power of cultivators, and once they were shackled, they would be no different from a cripple. He's dead for sure now. Luo Yu and the others all said in their minds. They did not care whether Ling Han was the culprit or not, and merely wanted to use this opportunity to kill Ling Han. In front of everyone, Yang Taiching handcuffed Ling Han, and at the same time said, "Don't worry, as long as I am alive, I will definitely guarantee your safety." Ling Han did not believe this in the slightest. Yang Taiching was indeed very strong, but the people here were not weak either. Luo Yu, Lu Ying, and the other 3 women were all at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and if the 5 of them attacked together, how could they not be able to stop Yang Taiching? As long as they could restrain Yang Taiching, even if it was only for 1 or 2 moves, the remaining people would naturally be able to kill Ling Han as easily as blowing off dust. Ling Han was willing to agree because he had the Black Tower. "Lads, come over here and form a circle around these 2 people. Even if you die, you are not allowed to move," Yang Taiching suddenly shouted. Yes, the 20 or so sailors answered in unison, and formed 2 circles in front of Ling Han and Shui Yanyu. Humph, they are only trash in the low extreme of the mountain river tier, what use could they be? Luo Yu and the others all thought. The gap between each cultivation level of the immortal level was too large. Even a sub-minor level could form a crushing advantage, what more when there was a difference of 2 or 3 minor levels. Even the legendary 5-star geniuses could only die with a grievance. The ship once again turned around, and sailed back into the black fog. Everyone became silent again. The bow of the ship slowly sailed into the black fog, and when the last ray of light disappeared, a great battle suddenly erupted. Ding, 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 peng, peng, peng. Everyone attacked without any reservations. Saber light and sword shadows surged, and power surged. Yang Taiching roared again and again. He turned into a wall, and was going to block all the people who were charging over. He was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and he had already reached the pinnacle of the peak stage. There was already no more room for improvement, unless he advanced to the Sun-Moon tier. After a few thousand years of tempering, his battle prowess had become incredibly fierce and domineering. When he punched out with his iron fists, their might was not the slightest bit weaker than the impact of godly metal of the same level. Moreover, he was also a 2-star genius, so his battle prowess was truly frightening. However, the problem was that there were far too many people attacking him. Moreover, none of them had any intention of fighting to the death with him. They only wanted to charge past the wall that he was. In this way, it was naturally much more difficult for him. If he wanted to block everyone, that would be an impossible task. Ah! A crew member screamed in agony as he collapsed to the ground, groaning in pain. "You dare!" Yang Taiching was furious. His 3-meter-tall body exuded a black metallic luster. He was finally serious, and used a powerful move. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.